Ms. Carnell, Mrs. Gerber, myself, Philip Dwyer, Mr. Convertito, Mr. Fattabine, Mrs. Maxon Cannelli, and Mr. Llewellyn. If I could ask you to rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So first up are our students, and so Mr. Schuster, do you wish to start?
Sure. All right, so as usual at board, we have a couple of athletic events going on. Tonight we have wrestling versus Wilton, fencing versus Morgan High School of Clinton. Tomorrow we have boys basketball versus Ridgefield, as well as girls basketball at Ridgefield. Our cheerleaders will host the FSAC Championships next Saturday at Fairfield Ward. Our 2015-16 school year course registration is underway now. Last night we offered a program for 9th, 10th, and 11th grade students and their parents, which we gave an overview of the program of studies, and they learned about all the course offerings. Next week there will be an introduction to the high school for the 8th grade students and their parents. This program will be held on February 4th and will include a tour of the elective programs and an overview of the program of studies and the course selection process for the class of 2019. On February 9th, there will be a class assemblies for the 9th, 10th, and 11th graders as well to review the course selection process and the new schedule model for next year, which is the block scheduling. And the goal for this approach is to inform students and parents on all the different offerings so that they're able to challenge themselves, engage in the courses that they want to, and manage their schedule. We're also using Infinite Campus this year to have students select their courses, which is a brand new system. Our school counselors presented a program this morning for juniors and their parents to introduce the post-high school planning process. The process for juniors begins now and doesn't actually conclude until their graduation in 2016. On Tuesday, February 3rd, the math department will administer the American Math Contest. It's a very challenging, voluntary mathematics exam. It enables our math students to test their knowledge and skills against students from across the country. Last year, more than 200 students participated, and we expect more to participate this year. Our debate team will host their Connecticut Debate Association tournament next Saturday, and our second quarter report cards, along with our midterm grades, will be released tomorrow.
Thank you very much. Any questions for our representative from Ward? Yeah, you're just from Ward.
Yep.
Ludlow won't start talking until we finish grilling our representative from Ward. Any questions for the representative from Ward? No? Ms. Finity, it's your turn.
So Ludlow, too, has had some great sports successes. The boys basketball won against Trumbull last week, which was considered a huge feat based on the program's record. Both the coach and the team are absolutely thrilled. The ski team has been very successful this year, as in years past, and the captains of the girls team especially await the state tournament and hope for successful runs. The indoor track team, both the guys and girls sides, have also had pretty winning records and look forward to the same success in the postseason. Recently, construction on a new wing of Fairfield Ludlow has just started, and students are beginning to adjust to the noise of the building. Teachers are a bit annoyed at the classroom disruption, but continue to teach. The one major complaint that I've heard from students is that this construction has closed off an entire staircase in the building, which has caused traffic in other parts of the school. Students are getting used to it, but are a bit upset that it blocks such a major stairwell, as well as cuts off several classrooms from the rest of the school. Others are confused as to why the cafeteria is part of this construction. Some students feel like it isn't used as much as the library, for example, and therefore shouldn't be expanded in the current plans. The construction also blocked some student parking spots, but all were able to find new parking spots with the help of Mr. Hatzis and Dean Craven.
Thank you. As both these guys just said, we had our midterms recently. They all went pretty smoothly except for, I believe it was second or third day. We had a small scare with the fire alarm going off in the building. That was a little rough because we had students standing outside for a little while, but it was handled pretty well eventually because we got everyone back in the building and the test resumed. I mean, some students were a little upset because they had to resume the test immediately afterwards instead of later, and it was cold, but everything else worked out pretty well. So the annual spring musical was just announced yesterday as being Grease. So students are pretty excited about that, especially because we're bringing in a new outside director to help with the music, which the students are pretty excited about. Other than that, there's not a whole lot of stuff to report, given that we just met a few weeks ago. But, as every year with the start of the second semester, seniors, especially those who have already gotten to colleges, have taken this time to really buckle down and work on their academics. So I think it should be a period of increased productivity for all of us.
Any questions for our representatives from Ludlow? No? Okay, well, thank you for staying with us. As always, you're welcome to stay, or you can go home and buckle down on whatever it is you're buckling down on. Thank you. We're at the point in the agenda where we take public comments from citizens on any item on the agenda. We have a rule that you can only speak once on a topic, and so if you wish to reserve your comments for that item when it comes up for a vote, then please do, or you can speak early and go home early as well. So who wishes to come forward first for general public comment? Please come forward, state your name and address. Whoever gets to the mic first. Either. Yes. Yes. We have gentlemen in this town.
Thank you.
Please state your name and address.
Elizabeth Vancho, 725 Galloping Hill Road, Fairfield. Dear Board of Education members, I'm a Fairfield parent of a Jennings Elementary School student and a member of the Jennings PTA Board. I am in full support of Dr. Title's education budget for 2015-2016. This year's budget reflects a thoughtful and responsible plan to address necessary improvements to our school academic infrastructure, resources, and capital needs, while managing ever-increasing healthcare and utility costs. Our school strategy must be dynamic and proactive if we intend to maintain the strong quality of education that Fairfield is known for. While I'm a proponent of careful budget management, I believe as a community we should encourage a level of annual investment in our schools to keep up with new mandates, increasing school student enrollment, and the need to provide new world skills which are necessary to prepare our kids for a completely different future and job market than we have experienced. Given the fact that Fairfield has continued its trend of having one of the lowest cost per pupil expenditures in all of Southern Fairfield County, it begs the question, how much longer can this continue before it negatively impacts our students' education and future? Therefore, I am in full support of Dr. Title's budget proposal. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you very much. So come forward before another person jumps in second. Oh, no, wait a second. If you don't mind, we'll let the gentleman come forward since he was next. No, go ahead, please. Okay. Yeah, what? No, he's deferred to you, so if you want to speak, please come forward.
We're a tag team.
A tag team.
We have a joint statement.
Please state your names and address.
Nancy Ross, Riverview Circle, Fairfield, Connecticut. I have 3 children in the Fairfield Public School System. I have been members of PTAs at Riverfield, at Roger Ludlow Middle School, and Special Education PTA. I'm currently a board member on the Roger Ludlow Middle School PTA and SEPTA. I ask you tonight to support the superintendent's budget as presented. I would like to discuss some of the new initiatives and staffing requests in the area of special education. I think that it is important for the board to understand that special education should not be viewed as separate from education as a whole. The law provides that children are entitled to a free and appropriate public education. The only way to achieve this goal is to implement the best teaching practices. For reading, the best practice is the implementation of scientifically researched evidence-based reading programs, which Fairfield desperately needs. Fairfield has been struggling with how to teach reading across the board, and finally, we are addressing this problem. The proposal to provide high-end intensive professional development to all special education teachers, pre-K through 12, in this area must be supported. This training will enable teachers to follow a specific step-by-step, measurable program, which in turn will support improved outcomes not only for children with disabilities, but for children at all levels. Reading programs based on scientifically based reading research ensures that every student is reading at grade level. Every student is reading at grade level. This is our common goal. Again, I reiterate that the board must understand special education is not taking away from regular education budget. Quite the contrary. The money allocated for this specialized training will allow Fairfield to finally implement a reading program that works for all types of learners. The teaching practices used in special education are in fact the best practices because they are research-based and have already been proven successful for teaching all students. Please support the budget as presented.
Thank you.
My name is Kathy Finlaw, and I'm the parent of 3 children. 2 children have gone through Fairfield Public Schools, and I have a daughter with special needs at Fairfield Woods. I'm very active on the board at Fairfield SEPTA as well as Fairfield Woods Middle School. Special education casts a huge net, which many children may fall under at one time or another. The administrators are responsible for implementing Section 504 plans, state reporting, the school climate, and the alternative high school. This is not a special education high school, yet the special education high school coordinator is currently the principal of the Walter Fitzgerald campus. These are kids who are at risk for many different reasons, and they need support. These children are entitled to have a full-time building administrator, and Andrea is fighting for their interests in making this request. While this is not a special education position, filling this position would not only allow the high school coordinator the time she needs to provide quality technical assistance to the staff, students and families at both high schools, and the ever-growing community partnership program for those aged 18 to 21, but it will allow the children at the alternative high school to be successful and get the attention they deserve. Special ed is horribly understaffed, and Andrea has put forth a fiscally responsible plan for moving forward. The position for a middle school coordinator is critical. This would allow for a coordinator at each level, preschool, elementary, middle, and high. We need to be able to provide teams and teachers with increased technical assistance to meet the needs of complex learners at all levels. Special ed is always accused of taking and not being proactive. This is because the coordinators are spread too thin to intervene early and support students and families before the crisis occurs. To deny this request is short-sighted, as the cost for one administrator is nothing compared to the money we will save in the long run. Please support the budget as presented. We cannot afford any more cuts. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sir, would you like to get your turn at the podium?
It's nice of you. Jan Bieber, Fairfield. I have my own timer, by the way.
Well, I'm glad that you do, but we use our own timer.
Not that I don't trust you. I support Bylaw Amendment 6. It's a common practice to require a two-thirds majority to make bylaw changes, and it's great that you're finally doing this. How you got to this point, though, illustrates a degraded decision-making process on your board. If you really believe that bylaws need a supermajority approval, why didn't you vote on that first? I'll return to that in a moment. First, I'd like to make 2 comments about your meeting minutes, which are an agenda item, and then I have a question about the budget. As of this afternoon, the draft minutes of the January 13th BOE meeting were not available on the town website. Per public meeting requirements and quoting from your own website, quote, draft minutes are submitted to the town clerk for posting within 7 days of a regular or special meeting. That didn't happen. I found a draft of the minutes on the school website. It provides no detail of public comments. Parents came before you with sincere issues ranging from overcrowding to student record requests, but no detail of what they said is memorialized in your draft minutes beyond incomplete two-word notations. The minutes also failed to reflect what I thought was the most cynical exchange and moral low point of the night, when one board member asked another to consider tonight's Amendment 6 first. The response by someone who claims that the BOE are his, quote, teammates, unquote, was a disdainful, quote, no. That interchange should be in the minutes. What we see then is an apparent failure to properly memorialize in the official history of the meeting any detail of parent problems and exact characterizations of BOE dissension. Not only have you circumscribed what the public can say before you, you've sanitized your minutes so that the details of problems raised and conflict on your own board are not retained in the detail they should be in written minutes, because written minutes, not video, are the official long-term record. Turning to agenda item 6B, approval of the school budget. The budget's available to the public in PDF and hard copy forms. PDF's been used in document distribution for over 2 decades, and hard copies have been around since Gutenberg. See, I would pass history. Why isn't the school budget available in electronic spreadsheet form for close examination by professional experts? Electronic spreadsheets have been commonly used since 1979 and appear to be used in creation of the budget. Why does the central office refuse to honor repeated requests for an electronic spreadsheet version of the budget? There's a common thread to the issues I've raised. The Board of Education has embarked on a concerted program to circumscribe public discussion, limit the historical record of the meager amount of public discussion that is allowed, prevent adequate budget analysis via electronic spreadsheets, while cementing its strangulation of public discourse by cynically refusing to vote on the supermajority bylaw change until it muscled through shackles on not only public discourse, but on free inquiry by its own members. This board is characterized by aggrandizing its own powers at the expense of transparency and free discourse. And I'll submit my statement for the record. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just give it to the board clerk.
Thank you.
And she'll make sure we each get a copy of it. Please come forward, state your name and address.
Thank you. Excuse me, Carolyn Trabucco, 221 Sherwood Farm Road. Yesterday I spent 2 hours at Town Hall in the records vault, reviewing Fairfield Town budget books going back to 1978. You see, I wanted to understand how the budget has grown over the years and its relevant cost drivers. But I also wanted to know what percentage the education budget represented of the overall town budget over time. From what I could find looking at 40 years of data, very dusty data, these past 6 years mark the absolute lowest year-on-year changes to the per-pupil education investment made by this town, which is counterintuitive, as well as out of line with the past, since enrollment over these 6 years has grown 8%. I could almost appreciate our town's determination to save the town a buck if I didn't also learn in the vault yesterday that over the same past 6 years, the town of Fairfield has essentially de-emphasized education, taking it from 58% of the town's spending in 2007 to 54.5% today. Several of our neighboring towns allocate 60 to 70% to their schools, and we wonder why our homes don't sell as briskly as our neighbors. This is not a legacy for us to hang our hats on. We have a very skillful superintendent in Dr. Title, and I would like you to support his very reasonable budget request of 3.29%. Allow him the opportunity to lead. You sit on the Board of Education. In my mind, you have 2 top priorities. 1, to evaluate the senior leadership of the school system, namely Dr. Title, and 2, to advocate for a budget that best satisfies the mission of our school system. Denying our students color copies and eliminating pre-K bus transportation is hardly in keeping with that mission in my mind. So let's talk about tonight briefly. You will bicker and you will argue, and at last you will be asked to vote. I want you to vote yes or vote no. Don't abstain. There is a pattern that has emerged from this board where members ask for a lot of information only later to abstain from the vote. Key abstentions happened in last year's budget vote, the Riverfield vote, the budget transfer vote, and the capital and non-recurring and security vote from 2 weeks ago. To me, it looks like anything having to do with money will cause someone to abstain, but not without first running the town ragged with requests for information. Now, I know that under Robert's Rules of Orders, you cannot be compelled to vote. However, patterns of abstentions may put you in breach of the duty of care clause under your fiduciary duty, not to mention Section 1, Part B, under your own Board of Education bylaws. Remember your job tonight. Do it, please, to the best of your ability, and remember to vote. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Please come forward, state your name and address.
Matt Hutzman, 317 Pansy Road. I'd just like to say I'm in favor of the superintendent's budget. The point I want to get across tonight is I'm sure that every board member has different ideas about what they feel should be in the budget. Pet projects or just certain areas. No one's going to agree exactly on the same budget. But what I would like to emphasize tonight is once this budget is passed, this is the board's budget. It's not whoever voted for it, it's the board's budget. I want to see when this budget is in front of the Board of Selectmen, Board of Finance, and RTM, I don't want to see 3 board members standing there supporting this budget, or 5 or 7. I want to see 9 board members standing in front of the RTM saying, this is our budget and we support it. To me, the only job that you people have, you people on the board have, is to support K through 12 public elementary school children in this town. If you are not willing to stand up in front of the other bodies in this town and say, this is our budget, we support it, and you should support it too, then honestly, I think you should question why you were on this board. I know there's bickering and arguing, and people have different ideas about how a budget should be transferred, how, different priorities in a budget, but once it is passed, it's your budget. Every single person on this board. And you should stand up as a group in front of all the town bodies and as 9 people and say, this is our budget. We stand for the children of the public schools of Fairfield, and we support them. We support this budget, and you should too. And when 9 people stand up and say that makes a big difference, as opposed to 5 people standing up in front of the boards and saying that, or 7, or 3, or whoever. Everyone on this board should stand up, no matter what the result of the voting tonight, and stand up and say, we are for this budget, and we support it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anybody else wish to come forward? Please state your name and address.
Suzanne Miska, 123 Rygate Road. I've written my comments tonight because I didn't want to lose track. I want to start by thanking the BOE for attempting to review this $160 million budget in such a short amount of time. I also want to thank Dr. Title for his tribute on the district website to the members of the BOE who submitted questions about this budget. By putting this information on the website, it allows other members of the other boards to appreciate the process that you all go through. As parents, we want to trust that the education our children will see will be competitive with other districts in our state and our country. As parents, we want to trust that we have hired the highest quality educators to lead our classrooms and provide our kids with the best curriculum and instruction that can be offered. I've heard the word trust bandied around this board in this town, especially today, an awful lot. To me, trust is something that's not just given, it's earned. To earn this parent's trust means that questions need to be asked and answered, that accountability is required, that information is provided in a transparent manner. So my big question tonight to this board is, should the parents in this room and watching on television trust in this budget? Do you trust in the financial reports given to you on the medical retention plan after last year's problem with funding? How do you trust that the $2.4 million that you have been asked to put in to meet the shortfall, which it is not, is going to be enough? You were told last year that the town would carry whatever shortfall happened, and while I appreciate the patience of the town, it is now falling on the backs of the children because it is going to have to be added to the Board of Ed budget? Do you trust in the food service financials that were not given to the board without being requested? This fund last year cost the Board of Ed operating $200,000 in expenses for food service because they were unable to pay due to the deficit. In addition, food service account cost the town $170,000 in unemployment for the food service workers. That was not disclosed at a Board of Ed meeting. The food service belongs to the Board of Ed, and it needs to be monitored so the problems we've experienced don't come up again. Do you trust that the list of additional administrative staff for special ed is going to improve and provide for our students with special needs when there's been no clear presentation or proposal? I'm all for helping the children with special needs in this town, but I do think we should have had a proposal put in forth so that we could appreciate what is being asked in the budget. Do you trust that the increase for PD for special ed for dyslexia will result in some sort of certification for our staff so they can work with these kids? Do we have anyone certified in dyslexia in the schools?
Ms. Miska?
Yes, I know I'm to the end, and I'm going to say it.
Well, if you have one more sentence, you will.
It is one sentence.
Thank you.
It's hard to trust when there are more questions than answers. My sincere thanks to those of you on the board who have asked the hard questions on behalf of the over 10,000 students, the Fairfield Public School staff, and our community. I trust that you are trying to do your job as elected officials and agents of the state.
Thank you very much. Anybody else wish to come forward? Please do. State your name and address.
Ed Gruzita, 440 Reading Road. Two quick things. One, I would just like to speak in support of the budget, as is, without any cuts. There's no budget that's perfect, but I think over the last many years, the administration in the district has done a good job of containing costs, finding efficiencies, all while improving education. And I think that's true in a variety of factors, whether you look at AP scores or where we stand fiscally in southern Fairfield County or across the state. And so my other fear is that as we move forward through additional town bodies, that less critical eyes will look just for cuts. That's the way it's played out the last few years, and I have that concern going forward. The second thing is about detail, and the word audit has been used in the past. And this is true in general, but specifically with regard to special education. Audits, comprehensive reviews, more information, detail, it's all good stuff. And it's true for every single line item on every single budget ever. My concern is that the board will vote for information when we know at this time there's a need. We are stretched thin. We've heard the words reactive, and this is in an area where we know that action early, being proactive, makes a huge difference. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Anybody else walking forward? Please state your name and address.
Julie Gottlieb, 153 Applegate Road, and fair disclosure, I am a rep on the RTM for District 6. I am going to read a statement, mostly because I'm so angry I'm afraid to let myself go off track. I support the budget in full as presented by Dr. Title and urge you to do the same. I am thrilled to see positive momentum in world language and other areas. However, I'm greatly concerned by the suggestion to deny the requests for special ed initiatives and staffing presented by Ms. Leonardi. We know there are tremendous increases in autism, ADHD, and emotional health issues. I know I don't need to give the percentages, although I have in the past, as I'm sure you're all aware, or should be, if you are making suggestions as to what should be added or deleted. So why are we trying to do more with less? When we provide critical support and supervision to people on the front lines, we serve every student, not just one segment of the population. At the high school, calls for help are on the rise. Mental health issues are very real. Having extra support at any level takes stress off the system and provides critical and beneficial support and services for all of our children. I am tired and frankly offended by hearing about gifted children and special ed children as being on opposite sides of the spectrum. I am tired and frankly offended by motions that take from one and give to another. And I am tired and frankly offended by what I see as yet another needless and provocative move to force parents to take sides. It is divisive and serves no one, least of all our kids.
Thank you very much. Anybody else? I see someone. Please state your name and address.
Mary Mayer, 585 Warner Hill Road. Thank you all for your time and your dedication. I support Dr. Title's proposed budget. It's responsible as it is and satisfies Fairfield's educational needs. I ask that each of you support and advocate this budget now and over the next several weeks. Make your decision, let us know where you stand and why, make a decision and vote. Please let the educators do their jobs. By supporting the budget, you are ensuring the opportunity for the highest quality education for our children. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, please come forward, state your name and address.
Bonnie Bertelli, Merritt Street. It's important not to mistake the increased need for staffing with enrollment numbers. When you consider the initiatives proposed by Ms. Leonardi and Dr. Title that address the growing population of complex children and their needs in our school system. Special education is often misunderstood by many not familiar with the challenges and uniqueness of those requiring individualized education. Take the 9 Sped Paraprofessionals. These paras will be assigned to identified children based on that child's need. As a parent of a Sped child and an active volunteer in the Sped community, I can tell you that no such assignment is ever given to a child without a proven need for it. In fact, the process of getting services, including para support, approved as part of a child's IEP in general, can be extremely challenging and take a great deal of time. There are countless meetings, evaluations, reports, test scores gone over by each team member after it's determined by the team, written into the IEP. If a para is required, that para must be assigned to the child by law. These staffing positions have nothing to do with enrollment numbers and everything to do with the individual needs of children throughout our district. Second point, special education currently in Fairfield is understaffed. We currently have 1 coordinator handling SPED for 1st through 8th grade. This is not a role that should be spread so thinly. Our SPED family community is fairly tight-knit. I've had too many conversations over the past few years with parents sharing their experiences on how hard it is when a situation occurs not to have quick and attentive responses, especially for us parents navigating the unknown with our children. When you have a situation and it doesn't get the attention in a timely manner, parents get frustrated. Frustration leads to conflict. Conflict can lead to legal fees. If a parent feels the needs of their child are not being met, they'll likely end up hiring a lawyer to deal with the school. If you want to help address the growing legal fees, be proactive and support the SPED staffing needs. The proposals Ms. Leonardi spoke about last night will benefit the entire district and ultimately the taxpayers in our town. Please, I ask that you fully support the initiatives put forth in the superintendent's budget proposal. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Please state your name and address.
Hi, I'm Patty Donahue, Congress Street. I urge you to please support Dr. Title's budget tonight with your vote. As you are all well aware, as the budget moves through the other town bodies, it is likely to be cut. It is very imperative to show a united front and make sure the budget is supported at this level. Personally, I would also like to express my support for the staffing support model presented by Andrea Leonardi. Our district is dangerously understaffed as far as special education is concerned. On page 155 of the budget book, you can see for yourselves that the special ed coordinators have a 325-to-1 ratio. It is impossible to manage 325 or more children all with different issues at varying levels and many individual needs. Last year, we had a very large amount of children outplaced. Perhaps if we were proactive, and we were being proactive versus reactive, we could have saved a great deal of money, and these children would still be in our school system. An additional coordinator will help identify and intervene in situations before it reaches the level of very costly outplacement and attorney's fees. I also ask that you please not divide the children into different worlds. Whether a child is special education or gifted and talented, they are part of the same student population world. Diversity creates a healthy culture, and the needs of the special education children must be met, or it will trickle down into the typical population. Please also keep in mind that staffing should not be based entirely on enrollment. Staffing must be based on the needs of the children. Children with more needs require more support. Para support is not given without being absolutely necessary and is always intensely scrutinized. I will not say the last thing I was going to say, but I just want you to reiterate, just to please support the budget as it stands. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Please come forward, state your name and address.
Kelly McWhinney, 947 Churchill Road. A little scared to go after some of these really eloquent people, but here he goes. There's always talk of which towns Fairfield should and shouldn't be comparing itself to when it comes to education. But the fact is, the districts with the most consistently lauded school systems either spend more than we do or are located in parts of the state where the cost of living, and therefore the cost of staffing, is significantly lower. I'm not saying we can or should match the spending of some of these higher spending districts, but this idea that gets floated that it's possible to run an excellent system with minimal investment if you just find the right cuts to make is misplaced. In order to get a quality result, you need to be willing to put in the investment. And there is no magic bullet, because otherwise someone would have found it. I'm gratified to hear that the superintendent's office listened to us last year and addressed important issues in this year's budget. The world language proposal is a very positive step forward, and you have to respect the balancing act they took on to improve the program while trying to keep costs reasonable with a staggered rollout. Furthermore, I love the idea of allowing sixth grade teachers to specialize in one subject area. As a former classroom teacher myself, I know that the quality of instruction will benefit when these teachers can immerse themselves in one subject. The special education initiatives are another way the superintendent's office has shown us they listened. Having a more robust support structure in place can only add value to the program, and I believe we will see cost savings down the line as early intervention requires fewer off-site placements, and as other people have said, lower legal fees. In terms of other things like the paras who supervise the lunchroom, please trust the administrators. They aren't looking to spend this money frivolously. Mrs. Gerber did a great job of explaining how a volunteer program like this becomes untenable. And, you know, in addition to that, more and more families have two parents working outside of the home. So I feel like certain elementary schools will be hit harder by a program like that than others. Looking for ways to nickel and dime this budget is not in anyone's interest. Lastly, I ask that you support this budget in full, both now with your vote and down the line when it goes to the other town bodies. There are officials who have already made up their minds to cut the budget, and who better than you, their peers, to fight for our schools? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, that person's walking sideways, not down the aisle. We don't have any more public comments, so we'll go on to our business items. Thank you very much. Next item is old business, the approval of the bylaw amendment. That's enclosure number 1 that was sent out to you. So the recommended motion is that the Board of Education approve the bylaw amendment to Article 6 per enclosure number 1. Mr. Patton, I think this is your motion. Do you want to make it? First, you have to make the motion.
So my motion is to approve the bylaw amendments for Article 4. Article 6. Amendments, Section 1800. Reading, the bylaws may be amended by the affirmative
vote of a 2/3 majority or 2/3 of the entire membership of the board at any regular or special meeting of the board, provided that a copy of the proposed amendment shall have been included in the call for such a meeting.
Thank you. Is there a second? Mrs. Gerber. You're welcome to make an argument for the motion if you wish, and then Mrs. Gerber, and then we'll have general board discussion.
Okay, we've talked about this for quite some time, and I'm just going to go through yet again a brief history of this amendment, which was proposed pretty much a year ago. And the context of the proposal was it was annual review of bylaws, and board members were encouraged, or not encouraged, but told that this is the time to make bylaw amendments if we so chose. And at the time, this was one of the few things in the bylaws structurally that was not in compliance with Robert's Rules of Order, which is how our town bodies choose to govern themselves. So because a bylaw or bylaws govern an organization and are deemed, you know, the rules of how that organization should conduct its business, changes to such document should be significant enough to require the vast majority of the members, not a simple majority, which is why Robert's Rules of Order has a 2/3 majority stated on that particular thing to change or amend or add a bylaw. So originally it was proposed early on, and several other board members decided that they had other amendments to the bylaws that they wished to propose. The chair so graciously decided, with the rest of the board's consent, to put this amendment last so that any board member who wanted to propose a bylaw amendment wouldn't get shoehorned in and would get his chance to shine or not shine in the sun before a more stringent voting percentage was enacted. So some of the amendments went to subcommittee, which took a number of months to then go through their business. So the reason why we waited for this for a year and we did not spring it on the meeting last month is just simple. It was courteous to let all the board members who wanted to propose amendments to get them in before this and do so under the old rules, which was fair, not just for some board members, but for all board members. So some board members proposed things a year ago, some went through committee, and some were proposed in the last few months. So this is it. This is the last hurrah. This is all board members have had their say, have had their day in the sun, and this is now coming before us after a year again. And that's why we're doing it now.
Thank you. Mrs. Gerber, you seconded the motion. Any comments?
For discussion purposes.
Okay. Any comments from the board? Mr. Fatterby.
I think it's somewhat unfair that the same body that approved various controversial amendments to the bylaws by a bare majority now brings forth an amendment to the bylaws to change the way in which bylaws are changed in the same session. I think it's, I agree in general and in principle, and have indicated before, that generally 2/3 vote to change the bylaws be appropriate. My problem with that change being implemented today is because of the controversy of the other amendments that have been made by a bare majority, and now that same bare majority is going to prohibit a modification of the bylaws without a 2/3 vote. I think that's unfair for this same body in this same session to make those amendments to the bylaws by the same bare majority. So therefore, I'm going to propose the motion and move that the motion be postponed indefinitely.
Is there a second for that motion? Mrs. Lou McCormick? So we are now debating the motion to postpone indefinitely. Ms. Carnell, you wanted to second it. Do you have any comment that you'd like to make? No? Mr. Fatterbean, do you have it? I assume that you made some argument for it. Do you have any further before I move on to the body?
No further.
Okay. Okay, Ms. Maxon Cannelli.
So, point of clarification, postponing indefinitely, obviously I understand what the words mean, but procedurally, what would that mean?
Effectively kill this amendment.
So, through the chair to Mr. Fadimine, I just want to be clear on what it is that you're expressing, so that while expressing support for the amendment, for the idea of the amendment, based on the nature of the way that it has come up, you are supporting a nay vote to the amendment.
As I indicated, I think that it's unfair for this body because this particular composition of board members in this particular session have passed controversial bylaws by a bare minimum. I think in fairness that the next body should make the decision, or the next session of during the next session of the next constituted board should make the decision on whether or not the bylaws should be changed by a 2/3 vote. So I think that that change to the 2/3 hopefully be made by the next session, if they so choose to bring that forward. I think it's unfair and inappropriate for the same body in the same session to pass controversial bylaws by a bare minimum or a bare majority, and then in that same session with that same body introduce a change to the bylaws that would be approved by a still bare minimum to a higher level of 2/3. I think that's inherently unfair and unjust, and one in which more appropriately should be left to the next body to change the requirements of passing bylaw amendments when they have their organization meeting, should they so choose. So my envision would be this would come up again, not in our session or our constituted board, but in the next board after the next election.
Thank you very much. Any further comments? Mr. Llewellyn.
I actually agree with Mr. Fadimine in the sense that the chair now has control over the majority of the board and has been able to, control, for example, the last set of bylaw changes and put them in a particular order so that the simple majority could get across, the ability to silence and take away the First Amendment rights of the public to speak on any topic they want, as well as silencing the minority from asking for data. And because the majority was able to pass this, I do think that this should be tabled for the next board to decide, because you've got control now. It serves no purpose other than to lock in what some may deem not to necessarily be the best bylaws for the town.
Thank you. Any additional comments before I go back to Mr. Patton? Is there any other comments that people wish to make before I let Mr. Patton make the final comments on his own motion? Mrs. Maxon Cannelli.
2 quick points. There was reference before to doing well in history and passing history, and it is a mischaracterization of the First Amendment to say that the public has been deprived of their First Amendment rights, because then I would expect to hear a petition before the RTM, Board of Selectmen, and Board of Finance stipulating that they need to stop being in violation of the First Amendment. Secondly, there has been absolutely no silencing of any minority who perceives themselves as such from making requests for information. Anyone on this board may make any request for information that they like. We simply, when we voted the way we did, asked that it be made in public. The public then is aware, there's transparency that a request has been made, and before time is used on it, let it be clear that it's been asked, because then the public could expect perhaps to see that report. So just to be clear, there has been absolutely no silencing of any board member for making any request for any information.
Thank you. Can I make a suggestion that we're talking about this bylaw, not the ones that we passed in the past, so debate on the last actions? Can we limit the debate to this particular motion? Mr. Fadimine, did you have your hand raised, or are you? No, okay. Mr. Llewellyn, and then as the final speaker, Mr. Patton?
Depends what he says.
Okay. Mr. Llewellyn.
Just to respond briefly, and point taken, thank you, but you're right. We can ask for whatever we want, but if it's deemed to require effort, then it can arbitrarily be denied.
Let's move on to the debate on this motion. Your final comments, Mr. Patton. This is on the motion to postpone indefinitely.
Which I am absolutely against. If for no other reason, then again, this was proposed a year ago. So to Mr. Fadabine's point, basically disagreeing with the way that the previous month's amendments were handled. So what you're saying is that a year ago, when 4 board members proposed amendments to the bylaws, and this was one of those amendments, we could have taken this amendment first, and then everybody would have followed under the same rules, or we could have taken it last, and everybody follows under the same rules. So what you're saying is the first batch of amendments that was proposed gets to go under one set of rules, and the second set does not. How is that fair? Secondly, by postponing indefinitely, what you're saying is that you want us to be indefinitely non-compliant with Robert's Rules of Order, which this should have been changed years ago, and it was not. It was obviously some kind of oversight. So no one's doing anything to stifle anybody. It was said a year ago, it was said throughout this year, that this amendment would come up again when every board member had proposed any amendments to bylaws that they wanted to propose. And that's what happened. Some passed and some didn't. You can't say that one side pushed the other side around. You can't say this board is political. Every board is adversarial. Every side, every motion, every issue on every board has its day in the sun, and some go through and some do not. And that depends who's on the board, certainly. Members make decisions. So you're contradicting yourself and contradicting the will of, not the will, but the intent of how this was proposed a year ago by tabling it indefinitely, by postponing it indefinitely. So I'm not for this.
Are we ready to vote on the motion to, no, Ms. Carnell? Well, you actually said it depends on what Mr. Llewellyn said, but please go forward.
They're both gentlemen. Through the chair to Mr. Patton, I think if I'm following you correctly, you made mention that Mr. Fadabine was contradicting himself. I'm just trying, I don't want to put words in your mouth. I'm trying to understand what you were alluding to. The way I interpreted this sequence of amendments, proposed amendments, is putting, is being incongruent, not what Mr. Fadabine is saying. And you, who are extremely diligent on Robert's rules and have even given me a copy, and saying that this is the way the other board, the town members do it, but it was an oversight. If it was an oversight, A, why is it tonight that it has to be done? And B, equally if not more important, as I have heard from Mr. Dwyer many, many, many times when I've asked a question, and my response is, because that's the way it's been done. So I'd like to understand why tonight, if this has been overlooked, and why do things get changed for this, that it is not the same when we ask questions and we get the answer, because that's the way it's been done.
I'll explain that on behalf of, because your question is through the chair to Mr. Patton, but when we acted on the original motion to put the bylaws in an ad hoc committee, part of that motion was that this bylaw amendment would come up the second meeting after we acted on the recommendations from the ad hoc committee, which essentially happened in November, December. We had a meeting in January. We noticed it, and this night we're acting on it. So it was scheduled to follow the action of the bylaw.
I'm sorry, in all due respect, I don't mean this sequence of the last 10 weeks. I meant, according to Mr. Patton, he's saying it has been overlooked for a long time, which leads me to believe he's not talking about this year or this 10 weeks. He means previously. That's what I meant.
I think we actually asked Mr. Fadabine if he had any memory as to why this was set this way in the original bylaws of the Board of Education that he joined 6 years ago, and you said...
I don't have any real question. I don't think it was overlooked. I think the original intent was to make it a simple majority. I don't know the rationale behind it, but I agree that in general, bylaws typically have a 2/3 vote to change them. For some reason, there was a decision at the time, which I don't know, I don't have no recollection why that decision was made, but I believe it was a conscious decision to make it a majority for probably
Okay,
the reason that the board was split.
So can I interrupt only in the minute is, I realize that Ms. Carnell is leading us down a debate on the motion as opposed to the motion to postpone. But finish your
The
statement.
other commenter is that there are many bylaws that do require some majority. It's not an oversight. The characterization of being an oversight, I think, has no support for it. And there are bylaws, other bylaws, that have a majority, and some bylaws have 2/3. I agree it's more common to have 2/3, but it by no means characterizes an oversight.
Last comments so that we can then take action on the motion to postpone indefinitely. Ms. Lou McCormick.
And I also want to just highlight that didn't we recently make a change to our bylaws saying that we were going to refer to Robert's Rules, Edition 11, and before we had referred to an earlier edition as our reference. And in the earlier versions, just so we're clear, the history, I think, of how Robert's Rules used to do this is that it actually said that constitutions, bylaws, rules of order that have been adopted and contain no rule for their amendment may be amended at any regular business meeting by a vote of the majority of the entire membership. So that was the old Robert's Rules language, that amendments would occur with a vote of the majority of the entire membership, okay? However, if you only had a quorum, it could be amended with a 2/3 vote. However, always, if you want to change how the rules are changed, which is what we're doing now, how the rules are changed, it would always require a 2/3 vote. So if we were to use the Robert's Rules from prior editions, the 2/3 vote to change the rules of voting would have always been 2/3. However, changing and adding amendments required simple majority. So there is a rationale, there was a precedent. However, this thing that we're going through now, to change the rules of voting by a majority, has never been part of Robert's Rules. It's always been a 2/3 supermajority to require the changing of the rules. However, because we choose to read our bylaws as we chose to read them, we're allowing this to happen with a majority vote when in history it's never been that way in Robert's Rules.
Are we ready to vote on the motion to postpone? We've lost 2 of our members. Do we know where 2 of our members went? We will proceed with the vote if we're ready to vote. Right?
Given the
Or
vote,
do
why
you-
don't you give him a few minutes?
We had a number of examples of a gentleman deferring to the ladies to speak, so I guess we can wait a few minutes. I didn't notice her leave. Did you notice her leave? So that I can check, we'll take a short recess. Thank you. Attend to it. So Ms. Carnell has to do that, and Mrs. Maxon Kennelly is able to stay. So we are finished with our debate, I believe, on the motion to postpone indefinitely the recommended motion that we approve the bylaw to Article 6 per enclosure number 1. With no further comment and debate, all in favor of the motion to postpone indefinitely, please raise your hand. Mrs. Lou McCormick, Mr. Fattabine, you're in favor of the motion to postpone indefinitely. Mrs. Maxon Kennelly, Mr. Llewellyn, all opposed? Mr. Patton, Mrs. Gerber, Mr. Dwyer, Mr. Convertito. The motion...
I move that we wait for Ms. Carnell to
She will not
return.
be coming back.
She will not be coming
tonight.
back. Thank you.
So the motion fails for lack of a majority. We're back on the main motion. Any
I'd
further
like to make a
discussion or
motion
debate?
that we postpone based on Ms. Carnell's emergency, because this has been a vote that we
You
had
wish to
waited
make
for
a
all
motion
7
to
people.
postpone to the next regular meeting?
Correct.
Is there a second for that? Mr. Fatterbean, any debate on the motion to postpone to the next regular meeting? It has been our custom to try and make sure that the votes take place when all 9 of us are here. So I support that motion because it keeps faith with past practice. Any other debate on that? If not, all in favor, please raise your hand. It is unanimous with 8 people here.
Thank you very much, Phil.
much. On to new business, approval of technology grant proposal, that the Board of Education approve the technology grant proposal, RFP number 813. Do I have a motion? Mrs. Maxon Kennelly, Mr. Patton, who wishes to present that on behalf of the staff? Anybody?
Nancy Burns is here to answer questions. I think it
Okay.
kind of speaks for itself. It's really an opportunity for us to take advantage of the state's technology grant.
So we have no presentation, just you're here for Q&A?
Correct.
Yes, sir.
Okay, do board members have a question on the technology proposal? Mr. Llewellyn, or not? Yes.
I have a procedural question. This hasn't come before the board before, has it?
No,
So are we being asked...
Is this a renewal or a new grant?
this is a new grant.
It's a new grant.
So we're being asked to approve it without having discussed it, or
We're allowed to do that.
We're allowed to, I
It is
understand.
it is our custom to hear at one meeting and vote at the next meeting.
That's what I'm asking.
Sometimes we have put an item on for action so that if there's no board members that object to taking action, we can. But if the majority of the board is not ready to take action, we can, well, no, before I finish that answer, is there a time issue with this particular grant
Yes,
proposal?
it has to be delivered to the state by February 13th.
Okay, so it's on the agenda because of that deadline.
Thank you.
Any other commentary or conversation before we take action? Mr. Patton?
So is this a grant that you sought out, or is this a...
This is similar to what the state did last year where
You
they
should
came-
speak closer to the microphone.
This is similar to the grant that you may recall from last year where the state issued basically a call to all districts in trying to support expansion of technology and technology infrastructure in support of the Common Core and the SBAC assessment in all districts. Last year we got approximately $165,000 that helped us get tablets across the grade levels as well as upgrade some of our remaining infrastructure desires. This year, we are basically going after additional technology to help support and enable us to take the SBAC and support some other programs. Last year, the grant came out in the summer, so it was pre-budget, so we were basically able to design our budget around what we wanted to do with the grant. This year, we had already submitted and gone through the superintendent's review of the budget. So because the funds have to be expended before, on or before June 30th of 2016, and that we get 26% and the district has to come up with the other 74 and change, we had to rely on the technology funding that we had actually submitted as part of the 15-16 budget proposal. So that's where the funding came from. The state intends to review the RFPs from all the districts, and then we'll bond it, which is why we had to be very specific about what our interest is and what we were going to purchase.
So this is not, so this is the proposal, we're approving the proposal For the
grant application.
For the grant application.
This is the grant application, right?
Okay. On the RTM, occasionally we would get things like this where we would be getting a grant or money and we would have to approve or accept taking the money. So
No.
this is the actual
No, they
proposal.
haven't given it to us yet.
That's what I got confused
Yeah.
with.
We have to give permission to submit the proposal.
We're Oliver on our knees asking for more.
Any?
Chair to Dr. Title, is there a downside to this at all? Usually there is not with a grant like
No,
this.
there's no downside to this at all.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions from Mr. Fattabine and then Mr. Llewellyn?
I guess just to clarify for me, I guess. So basically, we're spending about $705,000 on technology, of which the grant is going to be 26.07%, or approximately $183,000 of grant money. And that grant money is going to be used for buying additional equipment in addition to the $705,000 worth of already budgeted expenditure.
Correct. What is actually enabling us to do is to stretch our capital request, and by doing so, it's allowing us to buy additional equipment. Most of the money, if not all of the money for equipment this year is replacement, just trying to keep our fleet usable by the students. By doing this, we're able to actually meet some other objectives by adding to the number of machines we have available to students in the schools.
Right, so it's really a means for the state to provide resources to the district to buy additional equipment.
That's correct.
So as you make additional comments, you may want to bring the mic closer to you. Mr. Llewellyn, did you have any further questions?
I do, thank you. So, Mr. Fattabine pointed out, so we end up paying 75% or $521,000. And this is for fiscal year 15-16?
Correct.
It's for 15-16. And do we already have in the base budget these exact computers? In other words, we are going to be buying these with or without the grant. We are going to get 33% more if we win the grant.
In a general way, you're correct.
And
What I'm trying to clarify is that if we had no grant, we would have the capital budget presented as it is stated in the book, which is to buy $700,000 and change in replacement computers, be they tablets or desktops. There's a kind of a range of things that we would be investing in, but they would be a one-to-one replacement. What the grant is enabling us to do is take that extra money that's coming from the state and apply it to a couple of needs that we had that we couldn't fund. One of them was, as it's stated in the grant, at the elementary level. In 2009, we bought carts of netbooks for each of the elementary schools that had 15 devices in each cart. The extra money is going to allow us, when we replace those 15, which we had planned to do in 15-16, with an additional 10. So now we have a full classroom set. So it enables that cart, if you will, to be used in addition to the other 2 carts we've already purchased in the elementary schools to outfit basically a grade level at a time. So if we're testing all 3rd graders, for example, in SBAC, we can go into 3 different classrooms and take care of the students at the same time.
So if I can understand you correctly, instead of buying $705,000, which you're saying we have in the budget earmarked for these items now,
Right.
we're going to spend $888,000.
Correct. Mm-hmm.
And we're going to be trading up, so to speak,
Yes.
in order to get that.
Trading
Okay.
up and getting extra.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
We're essentially using the budgeted money and the plan as a match to get extra money. That's essentially
Is
what's
the board
happening.
ready to take action on this? Okay, first, before we do, we'll go to the public. We haven't figured out a system other than my own personal memory as to who came up before we voted on the item to speak and who is coming up now. So I trust to the honor system that, but I don't believe anybody came forward to speak on technology. Does anybody wish to comment on the technology grant proposal? Please come forward and state your name and address.
Suzanne Miska, 123 Rygate Road. I support any increase of putting technology into our schools. I'm kind of disappointed to see, again, I'm speaking as the mother of a high school student, to see that it is going down on the elementary and middle schools. We have been in our midterms that we just took using iPad-type devices to do the testing, which is great, except when we went to print, we crashed the whole class. we have to figure out how to make this all work. Our kids are going to be asked to do these things on the technology, and I'd like to see the high school starting to get a little bit of attention. We've got smart boards that don't work, teachers putting in requests at School Dude. If we could start thinking about our high school kids a little bit, that would be really helpful. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If there's no further board comment, we will go forward with a vote. I don't see any hands raised. All in favor of the motion to that the Board of Education approve the technology grant proposal, RFP number 813, raise your hands. It is unanimous with 8 people present. Ms. Carnell not present at the moment.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. We now have the main action item of the year. Before I read the recommended motion, so we put it on the table, the board has received a variety of documents either through the email or at the table today responding to those questions that were asked between last night and today. So those become additional information. We will go through the first round where if there are any board members who have any remaining questions of fact, not commentary or opinion or here's what I think we ought to be doing in the future, but any other questions of fact that may have that you may have as a result of the information you received. Once we have one round of that, we'll go on to the main activity, which is to consider any amendments that people may want to make, and then we will take them in alphabetical order, one board member at a time, and we'll just move around and deal with each amendment. For those in the audience who have already spoken on the budget, when we get to the main motion, you will not be able to speak, but if we have an amendment to the main motion to change the budget, you are welcome to speak on the amendment, whether you've spoken on the budget or not. With that as an explanation, let me get the motion on the table that the Board of Education approve an operating budget for 2015-16 fiscal year in the amount of, and we are temporarily leaving this blank pending any action by the board, and Ms. Munsell will keep her calculator handy, and at the end of any of our amendment discussions, if it requires a change in the budget as proposed, we'll enter that number at the end, and when I restate the motion, that number will be in there. And so therefore, I'll finish saying, and as presented to be forwarded to the town of Fairfield. Do I have a motion? Ms. Gerber, Mrs. Maxon Kennelly. So the motion is on the table. So let me ask first, Mr. Patton, alphabetically, if I start in the reverse order, just because I do. Do you have any questions of fact that you'd still like to ask?
I do have one fact question or clarification question. Thank you to the staff, by the way, for providing this information on such short notice, especially the chart on the new 6th grade potential schedule with the new world language. It makes things much clearer. So on that subject, I guess my question is, I think other board members had a similar question or similar concerns. The previous schedule, which had 2 ELA slots, whether it was split to reading, writing, or however the teacher split it up, sometimes interrupted by 20 minutes of Spanish twice a week. Those 2 slots currently, for example, this year, those count as 2 separate classes, whereas in the teacher's contract, the teachers are only required or can only teach 5 classes, correct? So that counts as 2 of the 5?
That counts as 2 of the 5.
Gotcha. I think that was where the confusion was, is everybody thought the ELA was 1 class, where it is actually 2 classes. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Is that your last question?
That is.
Mr. Llewellyn. Reverse alphabetical, and then when we go through the commentary, I'll go from the beginning. Oh, yes, I put, that's, yeah, sorry.
I don't know my alphabet, but I was just checking.
No, I think you know math, I just don't know English. Mrs. Maxon Kennelly, thank you for the correction.
At this point, I've had all my questions answered. Thank you.
Okay. Now, Mr. Llewellyn.
This is questions or comments?
Questions of fact, and then we'll go by
with them with questions.
No? Okay, thank you. Let me recheck this. Mrs. Lou McCormick, any other questions of fact that you have that you want to get clarified before we debate the budget?
Actually, I was curious, I'm not sure, I didn't get a chance to read these papers over here. Did we specify what the 6 teachers that were allocated to Ward were going to be, the specific classes?
Could you speak up so we
Specialty?
understand the question?
Sorry, I don't know if I can, is that better?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
better. Right.
So the specific classes that the 6 teachers allocated to Ward were supposed to be instructing?
Page 142. They're listed as high school, but they're almost all at Ward.
So let's just go through. So there's the English, yes. Is the math, music, all these .2, .4s? Is this?
Yes.
So let's see, one. And the high school speech language pathologist, high school band teacher.
0.5 in each high school for the speech language pathologist.
High school band teacher, art teacher, reading teacher. Okay, so it goes down across really all of the different classes.
Yes.
It's just a partial allocation across all of them.
Correct, because we analyze it down to the best estimate we can. So if we don't need a full-time teacher or whatever we think we need, we only put in the fraction that we think we need.
Okay, so these aren't actually new hires, these are extension of existing staff, or how are we doing
They
this?
could be extension of existing staff if there were, say, an art teacher in the district who was 0.8, and we are adding a 0.2. That person could put in for that job and be given the 1.0. Wouldn't necessarily be a new person working 0.2. It all depends on if there are part-time people already in the district. We approve the FTE count, and then the HR department goes through the process of actually filling the positions, posting it, and interviewing and hiring.
Is that it?
Okay. Yeah.
Any other questions of fact that you wish to ask or on to debate?
Well, one more question regarding the high school staffing.
Again, look, speaking to the microphone so everybody at the
Sorry,
table
it's
can
at
hear you.
a particular angle, I guess. For Ludlow High School, I understand we had a shortage of staffing in the science area. Is that, so how does that work with the existing staffing needs? Is, like, which takes precedent? The new need? I guess I want to understand, like, how that process works.
That has nothing to do with the budget and the allocation of FTEs to the school. That's a matter of, are we able to find qualified people to fill the positions once they're allocated? So the positions are allocated. It's just a matter of, if we're going to
finding people.
Finding
Well, that was part
qualified
of my
people
question
to fill them, or if
Right.
people decide to retire on August 20th and they're in a shortage area, then it puts you in a very difficult spot. But the 1.0 FTE for that position is still there, it doesn't go away. Obviously, if you have some, if you had a half-time position, you had trouble finding somebody or whatever, and somebody was already half-time, you'd probably make them full-time and you'd fill it. But those particular positions were all full-time, and we do our best, but that's a shortage area. We've gone down this block a lot.
And
But
so we-
it's
so we
not
think
it's
we-
not a matter of we don't take it out of the budget or anything like that, right?
And we are focused on the motion on the budget, not on the general hiring practices and the ways in which Mrs. Leffert has to fill all the positions that are required. Any other questions related to the budget?
No.
No?
Can I ask a quick follow-up?
Go ahead. A follow-up related to the budget.
Related to the budget and related to page 142 in terms of the breakdown of the extra staff. What is a 0.2 on a band or an art teacher constitute?
1 period of instruction out of the 5.
Okay.
So full-time for most subject areas, there's a couple exceptions, most subject areas at the high school level, as it is at the middle school level, full teaching load of 1.0 is 5 classes. So what we're saying is we are anticipating a need for an additional 1 period. So that's a 0.2. That's how we do the fractions in most content areas. So there's a couple exceptions to that, but that's how it generally works. So 0.4 is 2, 0.6 is 3, and so forth. So that's why you see those decimals in there.
I could see art because obviously that would add an extra class.
Correct.
Band seems.
Band could be because we've got a very large band, and we actually have to split the band into two classes. We can't fit them all into one. It's actually happened at the high schools.
Now, contractually, with the teacher's contract with whatever, like the 5 classes are allowed to teach, or however that works, can a teacher then take an extra class? Or they can't. We have to have another.
No, they can take an extra class, but they get compensated for it.
Okay, it's a beyond the standard.
It's beyond the standard. There's a fractional percentage they're paid on in addition to that. So there's also limits in addition to the 5-period schedule. There's also a limit in total load that a teacher may have across those 5 periods. So you have to pay attention to both of those things when we determine the hiring needs.
Thank you.
And that question relates to the budgeting needs. Mrs. Gerber, any questions of fact that you wish to still ask?
Well, I do have one question, but it's regarding one of the possible amendments. So should I just hold off?
Address that
at the time.
Address that at the amendment, and
Okay.
if the person who suggested the amendment never brings it forward, I'll come back to you anyways. Mr. Fatterbean, any questions of fact that you have prior to acting on the budget, debating the budget?
No.
Mr. Convertito, any questions of fact before me? Okay. So now we're going to go in correct alphabetical order, and that starts with Mr. Convertito. You had made a suggestion at the last meeting that you might consider any amendments to the budget. What is your desire?
I have no proposed amendments at this time.
No amendments. Thank you. Mr. Fatterbean, you had not thought of one at the last meeting. Do you wish to make any amendments at the time? You don't have to create one.
Skipped yourself.
Not created. But no, not this time.
Thank you. I did skip myself. We sent out an email, so let me bring that one forward. I know it doesn't seem like I'm following. We sent out an email regarding the follow-up on the discussion we had regarding pension and health. Did everybody get a copy of that email and bring it with them? If not, have copies of the email that went out so that you'll be able to see the numbers right in front of you. So let me put the motion on the table, and then I will talk about it. I move to amend the superintendent's proposed operating budget for 2015-16 by reducing the pension account by $293,000 and increasing the health insurance account by $293,000. I make that motion. Is there a second? Mrs. Maxon Kennelly moved and seconded it. Since I made the motion, and I'll then turn over to Mrs. Maxon Kennelly. We create a budget, as the board knows, based on frequently October results on certain line items that the town gives us the number. And so in the case of the pension fund, they look at the market conditions as they are, look at the liabilities that exist in the pension. They turn it over to some actuaries who get paid big bucks, and then they give us a number that says, here's what you have to budget this year for the Board of Ed employees who are part of the town pension plan. As we get closer to voting on the pension, on the whole budget, they look at numbers again and give us the latest available information. In this case, the actuaries came back and said you have to, you can put in $293,000 less and still be budgeting where appropriately. Because we are short in our medical retention fund and trying to play catch up over the next couple of years, and the experience rating for the last month that we heard last night was worse, and we need $284,000 more in that fund. And because we're behind, I thought that it would be appropriate to take the entire $293,000 savings that we have in pension and allocate it all to the health account. It matches the $284 that is the need and gives us an additional $9,000 toward the prior deficit. So that is why the motion is in front of you. And Mrs. Maxon Kennelly, do you have any comments you wish to make?
Just one additional comment that I appreciate that the 9,000 staying here with this line, because that's keeping faith with the request from the other town bodies in terms of we find some spare cash that it's going into that, and so this is staying true to that.
Thank you. This has no effect on the actual bottom line of the budget because it's just shifting from one line to the next. Any other comments from board members that they wish to make? Mr. Convertito.
I just want to make sure we have the object codes where we're looking at 201 and 207. Those are the correct object codes. Under benefit, I'm looking at 39, page 39. Under executive summary, I'm starting there. Just so it's object code 2. We're just making a transfer from 201 to 207 for 293,000.
Did I get it correct? Yes? Yes. Yes, the answer is yes.
Right, just, yeah. Okay, thank you.
Any further questions from the board? Mr. Fattabine.
Just a clarification. So then, the approved budget remains the same. It's not a dollar change or amount change in the approved budget. It's just a line item change.
Yes, I'll state it as the proposed budget at the moment.
Right, the proposed budget. So that's an amendment.
It has to
A
be an
motion.
amendment in order to move it from one line to the other, yes.
All right, the other question I have, just in this email that was handed out, just out of my curiosity, I assume you got the information from it says Bob, that's Bob Mayer, I imagine, or some other Bob. I don't know.
That's Bob Mayer.
Bob Mayer, the chief fiscal officer of the town,
that's what
yes.
I thought. And
It
it's
actually came from Hooker and Holcomb.
okay. That was my assumption, but I just wanted to make sure.
Correct.
And then you have the new H&H contribution. What is H&H?
Hooker and Holcomb. They're
That's the expensive actuaries that the town hires.
All right, so those are the actuaries that calculate the amount of money that's required for the town to deposit for the fiscal year into their pension plan.
Yes.
All right, I just wanted to,
Yes.
That's good.
Any further questions from the board? If not, this is an action item, so we'll go to the public in case they want to ask questions of the actuary who's not here, so please don't. No, ask any questions you wish or make any comments that you wish. Any comments from the public on this item and this item only? I see nobody coming forward. Back to the board. Are we ready for a vote? All in favor of this amendment, please raise your hand and signify aye. It is unanimous, 8 people in attendance. Thank you very much. You were at Mr. Fattabine. Mrs. Gerber, any amendments that you wish? The answer is no. Mrs. Lou McCormick, I think. Yes, I've got my alphabet correct. Any amendments that you wish to propose?
Yes, so I want to go back to the 2011 program cuts. And
Is there a document that you can refer the board to so that we might follow along?
this is the spreadsheet.
Okay. Is it your intent to introduce this as an amendment, and we should put it on the table as an amendment so we can then debate it?
Discuss it?
I don't know. What's your intent?
Yes. Sorry?
What's your intent? Mrs. Lou McCormick, what's your intent?
I think I'd like to discuss each of these items.
Well, you
line
have
by
to put a
line.
motion on the table first to discuss any item, so,
Well, that's what I was going to tell you what it was.
yeah, so.
Is that okay? Okay. So, on the add back to budget section, see the dark blue items? I was going to make a motion to restore.
Black and white copies, so.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Okay. So the 3 ones with pluses on top. See, add back, there's plus, plus, plus. Do you see them?
No, if you could mention the
Sure.
line.
Okay.
Okay, you're referring to these pluses?
Yes, the ones that say add
Referring
back
to
to
these
budget.
pluses, okay.
There's pluses.
Yeah.
Okay. And so I wanted to go through the 2011 program cuts that were still outstanding.
Could you just make a motion, though?
So
Yes,
you
I will.
wish to, please make a motion so that
I'm
we
giving
can
you the overview
debate.
because I'm going to make a motion.
No, but
Oh,
you
so
need to make a motion so that we can
I will
then
make a
debate.
motion to add back the remaining 2011 program cuts listed, which are the Restore the Gifted Assessment 2nd and 4th grade, Restore 5th grade music, Restore middle school gifted program commitment. Okay. We can do them line by line.
Do you wish to continue with the world language or not?
I do. Would you like me to continue that on the line?
That's part of the
All
motion
right.
that you're...
I would also like to add back to the budget, on top of the 6th grade proposal, which exists, to add back 4th and 5th grade 2 days per week. And I'd also like to consider add back the 3rd grade with 3 additional classes. I don't know if pricing was provided on that, so I don't know that it's possible that I can add that back at this point. I think I was given 4 additional classes, but not 3. I made up a number of 200, but I don't know what the actual number is. So if you want, I can withdraw that if we don't have a number.
It's up to you.
Well, I don't have a number, so I would make the motion to add back 3 additional classes for 3rd grade.
Okay. So that you, that's the 200,000 that you put in.
I'll use the 200,000. I think that's more than enough. It's probably too much. And then the 2nd grade for 2 additional classes at the 121,243.
Okay. So I'll be asking Mrs. Munsell at some point what those 6 numbers add up to, but that's your motion?
That
those
is the
6
motion.
lines?
Yes.
Is there a second to the motion? Is there a second to the motion? Mr. Llewellyn, are you seconding the motion?
Second the motion,
Thank
but
you.
also make an amendment that we need to add the top piece to it. It's all one. You add and do it as a net.
It's her motion, Mr. Llewellyn.
Yeah, no. So that is a motion to add
Okay,
these back.
But that's the motion, and so I'll repeat the motion so we know it's on the table and people are clear. It's to add these 6 line items to the budget, which is Restore Gifted Program, $22,700, Restore 5th Grade Music, $34,000, Restore Middle School Gifted Program Commitment, $40,000, Restore World Language 4th and 5th Grade, $229,723, Restore World Language 3rd Grade for 3 additional classes, $200,000, and Restore 2nd Grade, Create 2nd Grade, I shouldn't use the word
those are
Restore,
all Create,
123,243, and those 6 items, 121,243, and those 6 items add up to, Mrs. Munsell?
607,666.
Can you speak up so that I can hear you?
607,666.
607,666. Okay, so
I'm missing something. That's 5 something. That's 5 lines.
wait a second.
22,700, 34,000, 229,723.
No. Let me repeat the numbers. 22,700.
Missing that.
34,000. 40,000. 229,723. 200,000. And 121,243.
That's all right. Let them do what they want.
647,666.
Okay. Which is the number at the bottom of the page. Thank you for confirming that. Now that motion's on the table, Mrs. Lou McCormick, you wish to advance the motion?
I need to further the motion with the offsets. So those are the adds, and then with that, I want to offset those with items from the cuts to budget above. So we're doing a replacement. I know it's a complicated motion because I have so many items in there.
Yes, it is.
Yes. But I figured I'd do it in one fell swoop, and then we can divide and discuss. Since I think there's no other motions on the table
First, we need to
tonight
have the
anyways.
motion on the table. So you wish to continue on your motion. Mr. Llewellyn withdraws his second while she continues to work on the motion. So we have 6 items to add, and what do you wish to deduct?
Oh, no, they kind of go together. They kind of go
What
as a
What do you
package,
wish to
so
deduct?
we can debate it. All right, so I'd like to deduct, as you see the first item, color copy, which is a $45,000 cut. Okay, and then the pre-K busing at 151. Which is 296. I'm going to add this as we go. And then we have the Jennings Media Center
Can I
carpet.
interject for a moment before you finish that sentence? There's a memo on your table in front of you that was handed out tonight that you asked for clarification on exactly what that number would be, and that memo, I believe, says $13,765 is the
Correct.
value of that carpet.
Yep.
That's the number you're going to use?
Yes.
Thank you. No. No, I'll clarify that, okay?
Are you questioning the lunch aids?
No, just continue.
Oh, the lunch aids was from Mr. Convertito, so I...
Continue, please.
Okay.
So he didn't make a motion?
No, please
He didn't
continue.
make a motion. This is
No.
from yesterday.
Please continue.
And then there is the FLHS carpet, excluding the Wright House, which was $20,707.
20,707.
Is that right? 20,000, right?
20,707 is on the memo that came out tonight.
And so I don't know if we can tally that as we go.
Ms. Munsell is doing that.
So what are we at? I'm sorry.
54.
354? 35.4, okay. And then we'll do the key unification for 40. And then we have the
I didn't get that last
administrators.
one.
at
Again,
68.
speak up.
And
I didn't
one-
get that last one.
No, I'll go through all the numbers with you to clarify.
Okay, so where are we? I just want to get the
Are you
sum
at
of
the
where we
sound
at.
panel?
So you're no. So the sound panel was not my
Okay,
motion again.
Continue.
And the administrators positions. I think the net was. No, not yet. I want to see how the others add up.
So what numbers are you
That's
looking
the
for?
68040.
The 68040.
I'm not sure if that was confirmed, but that's the number that we came up, assuming 26% for benefits. You can tell me if that number's correct or not.
And that's the administrator at Walter Fitzgerald?
Yes, correct. And then the other administration position was the special ed coordinator of 161,280. And so where am I now on the total?
So let me repeat the numbers, Mrs. Lou McCormick, so you can follow along and make sure I've picked them up correctly while Mrs. Munsell clarifies these numbers. The first is the 45,000 number. The next one is 151,377. The next one is 13,765. The next one is 20,707. The next one is 40,000. The next one is 68,040. And the last one is 161,280.
Right. And what is that sum total at that point?
The additions and subtractions?
Yeah,
No,
you can
no.
share the net. That's fine.
No, just the ones that, these are the subtractions.
No, it doesn't matter.
The
Either
numbers
way.
that I just mentioned.
500,169.
500, 169? Okay.
So does that constitute your motion?
500, 169. Yes, I think that's fine.
Okay.
Hold on a second. We sent out a memo about the cost of the special education positions, right? So we can give the real live numbers for that, right?
Yeah, there's a few numbers that are not correct on
Correct.
here.
So we should get them correct.
Yes, you should get them.
Yes.
Yes,
So
yes,
we
yes.
did confirm or change.
Okay.
So-
we did as much as we could on this. So
So the number of 68,040, the number that is corrected would be what? My apologies to
No.
the public as we construct.
because
But the number we
we've got to
provided was
net
the
off
net
the.
of the add back of the dean and the two
Right, exactly.
stipends.
Yes, those have to be changed. Those two are not completely correct.
Plus the two stipends
Yeah,
make the program whole.
that's right.
That's your intent.
Exactly.
For the program to be what it is currently.
Correct.
So the offset for the Walter Fitzgerald campus is only 43,738.
Okay.
Fine.
43, 738.
That's in place of the 68,040.
Correct. And the
the
special ed coordinator.
Yeah, let me just get the numbers right first.
Yeah, that's what I'm
The
doing.
161,280. What is the proper number to replace that one?
155,519.
Okay, so if you,
Which is what, 160.
Mrs. Munsell, if you change those last two numbers to the last two that were just given to you. Instead of 68,040, it's 43,738. And instead of 161,280, it's 155,519. And the total is?
Well, we have other corrections. I have other different numbers.
To the numbers that she was mentioning?
Yes. So to add back grade 5 music, so I believe the number that was put in was 34,000. Is that what you had?
That's what I had last year.
Let me stay with the cuts side to make sure we've clarified that number, because one number is the cut side, the other number is the add side. Any change to the cut side beyond the numbers that were just corrected, the two numbers that were just corrected?
What's the 13,765? So the staffing numbers, the staffing request changes were the Walter Fitzgerald administrator, the grade 6 through 8 coordinator.
Yes, it was the two administration positions.
Any
that's
other?
it.
Okay, that's it as far as staffing went on the cut side.
At the moment, we have the 43,738 that you gave me and the 155,519.
Correct.
Plus the other numbers that we had already put in. What is the total of that group?
470,106.
470,106. So now you wish to make corrections to the add numbers that were part of Mrs. Lou McCormick's motion.
Right. So you want to add the second 30-minute 5th grade music class, right?
Yes, that was right.
So to restore that, it's a 0.8 FTE based on the configurations for next year by the arrays. So that would be a 0.8 increase. The number would be 51,691.
Okay.
51,691.
691.
And just so you know, I got my 34,000 from last year, so
Yes,
that was the
correct.
last year's
Well, I don't
number.
know if it was 0.8 last year. To be honest, I don't recall, but there are
It all
salary
depends how many
changes in-
fifth grades there are in any given year.
Yeah, so
That's
it was
true,
in the
too.
mid-30s
So that's
last
fine.
year, but
Right.
this year it's 51,691.
Fifth grades are getting big.
Correct. As far as world language, so let me make sure I've got this straight. You want to add 2 additional classes to grades 4 and 5. You want grades
Correct.
4 and 5 to be 4 times 25. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, that number changes slightly to 232,610
Okay.
instead of the 229 number you had.
I'm going to let you guys do the addition so I can adjust accordingly.
Yeah.
'Cause I
And then you wanted to add 3 times 25 to grade 3. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So instead of 2 classes a week, which we had
No,
costed
we
out,
had
you want
4 before.
3.
You had costed out 4 times a week.
Correct.
For me.
So 3 would be 167,997
160.
as opposed to 167,997
Okay.
as opposed to 200,000 that you had.
Okay.
What else did I miss?
Is there any change to the last number?
Oh, the other one is, which last number?
The second grade.
The 121,243 that changed to second grade, 2 additional classes?
So second grade, yeah, there's going to be a slight change to that. Let me just calculate that.
Sorry, my calculator just died. Otherwise, I would add these.
So the number for adding 2 second grade 25-minute classes would be 122,767. 767.
Okay, so let me confirm the numbers that would be on the add back side of the motion. The first number was 22,700. That did not change. The next number is 51,691. That was a change from the original one. The next number remains at 40,000. The next number is 232,610. The next number is 167,997. And the last number is 122,767. And the total of those numbers are
637,765.
637,765.
65.
765. Okay.
So your motion, including those numbers, is to, I think you started with the add numbers first, is to add $637,765 to the budget as outlined on those 6 lines with the numbers adjusted as our conversation just took place.
Yeah.
And then to cut from the budget on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5,
And you know what, from that
6,
proposal,
7 lines.
I'm going to strike the second grade proposal. I'm just trying to balance the numbers.
Is it possible that perhaps you should fashion this and then we move on to others and then come back to you? Or,
Sure, if there's anybody else has a motion,
I'm
that's
just concerned that we're spending
I'm
all
sorry.
this time trying to create a motion.
Well, I just got the numbers, so.
Well,
the world language numbers I just
Mrs. Lou
got.
McCormick, please, respond to the board, not to the public. So what is your desire? Are you almost there and you just want to make one more change and we're done?
Well, I want to offset them. I want an equal offset. That's the intention, is to do an equal
So why
offset
don't-
of adds and
Why don't you do your,
subtracts.
you have the correct numbers, so why don't you do your math so that you get the offset number that you want? You're trying to get this down to 0.
Yep.
Okay,
So just to
thank you.
confirm, that all the subtracts were 470, 106. Is that right? All the cuts?
That's correct.
And the adds were 637, 765.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, so while you work on the math to try and get it balanced, we'll move on to Mr. Llewellyn. So while she's doing the math, do you have anything that you wish to add beyond what is going to be covered by this motion once the exact numbers get added up?
I think what I'll do is I will, I will come back after, if I may.
Pass. You'll
but
pass.
I have a comment I can make now if
Right.
you
Yep.
like, or I can save that.
Mr. Patton, do you have any? No, I've already. I did. I have an arrow that brought down there. Thank you very much. Mrs. Maxon Kennelly, you said no proposed changes, but do you have anything at the moment? No? Mr. Patton, we're going through fairly quickly, so Mrs. Lou McCormick, it was almost coming back to you. Mr. Patton, you have no changes? Yes. So we're now back to Mrs. Lou McCormick, and have you got it balanced?
All right, so I'll strike the second grade.
We're striking from the add back to the budget.
Correct.
Correct?
Yeah.
So that 122,767 is stricken
It is stricken.
from the motion.
So we only bring it back to third grade. And I don't know if you have the numbers available, but if we did 2 classes in third grade versus 3, what would that be?
While she's looking, can I ask you a question just to make sure it's not an FTE question, Ms. McCormick? On the gifted, Restore Middle School gifted commitment, do you intend that to be an FTE because we need to cost that out? Or was that like a lump sum of what was that supposed to be, I guess? I just want to make sure it's not, if it's an
My
FTE.
understanding from various parents who had kids from back then was that there was a commitment to invest in the gifted program in middle school in the amount of $40,000, which was approved but never actually implemented.
All right, so it's not an FTE. That was my only question.
I don't believe so. I believe it's actually just the running of the programs,
Okay.
but I could be wrong. There was an original intent in 2011 when it was originally passed.
Okay.
So I'm trying to restore the commitments that were originally approved back then, which were then since cut. Or I don't know if those cut. It was never
The
implemented.
40,000 is a good number for you. It's not related to FTEs.
Right, that's what I want to make sure,
that's-
because if it was the intent to add some FTE, we'd have to cost that out. But
Thank-
it's not, so that's fine.
Thank you. So we're 121 off of 767 is roughly 516 versus 470 at the moment, and they're costing out 2 classes in third grade instead of 3.
2 classes in third grade would be 109,844.
So that's roughly 57,000, call it 56, because then that makes it even for me to math. That would be just about even. So let me repeat these numbers and follow along, Mrs. Lou McCormick, so that we can get a total. To the add would be 22,700, the 51,691, the 40,000, the 232,610, the 109,844, and there's no change to second grade. That's a 0. So that's 109,844 is the last number. Did I get that correctly? Mrs. Lou McCormick?
Yes.
And the number is?
What's the number on that? Is that 5? What do you get?
456, 845.
456. Okay.
So you have a slightly more cuts than you have adds.
By about 14,000, right? And so that basically pays for the Jennings media carpet. Okay. Is that right? The
Pretty close.
13,765 is pretty close. Okay. So we'll add back the Jennings media carpet. And then we'll make it flat.
Which is to remove that from the list, remove 13,765 from the list of
No,
cuts.
you know what? We'll keep it. Just
please.
keep it. I'm sorry.
Please.
Sorry. We'll just keep it, and that'll
Help,
be it.
help the board out here. We're going to keep that
We're going
in
to
there.
keep it. We're going to keep the cut, and that's
Okay.
it.
So the motion would read that you started with adds, and so you would add the 22,700, the 51,691, the 40,000, the 232,610, and the 109,844 for a total of 456,845. And you would reduce the budget by the these pages are up at the back of the table for those who may want to follow along. The 45,000, the 151,377, the 13,765, 20,707, the 40,000, the 13,678, the 43,738, and the 155,519, which that is the total of.
No, she didn't have the Dwight pre-K playground. The 13,670 was not on it. She chose not to do that.
Right, correct.
That is not on there.
Yes, correct. That has no check mark. Without that number, the number was 47106?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
So budget reduction of 47106. Is that the
I think that
final
sounds fine.
question,
Yeah.
final motion?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, Mr. Llewellyn, do you wish to second the motion? Thank you. Now that we have the motion in front of us, do you wish to make any commentary on in support of the motion?
I think the general statement here is I basically am just looking to reallocate some of the spending towards student programs versus some of the other areas within the budget book. It's a huge budget book, but I'm specifically interested in trying to restore some of the student programs that were cut before. And as well, my view on world language, and we can debate this all day long, is that I kind of feel like if we're going to do world language, we should do it. And if we do 1 year in progression every year, you kind of have to redo the curriculum all the way up to 12th grade for each of those years and keep redoing it because you're starting a year earlier. So I feel if we ladder it over time, it's actually going to be more expensive and less efficient and more disruptive than if we actually just reimagine it, invent it properly, and then roll it out. I debated between second and third grade, which is why I'm kind of indifferent. We start at fourth grade now, but now we only have 2 days. I think these are very valuable years. Clearly, the younger you start, the better. I would love to roll it down to kindergarten, given budget, but understanding the constraints, even if we started in third grade, I think that would be a huge difference to the way kids internalize the language. I thought grading it with third grade, twice a week, I think that is fine as an introduction. I think 1 time a week is just too little. And then fourth and fifth grade, 4 times a week, sixth grade, 5 times a week with the option of French sounds fabulous. And I think we roll that out. And I think we have, arguably, one of the strongest language programs out there. And I think that would be wonderful for our town. And if we can do that by, arguably we have to sacrifice some carpeting. Our keys don't all match for a little longer. Pre-K busing is probably the biggest point, but I've made my views very clear on the fact that, you know, the pre-K program costs us $350,000 to $500,000. I don't know the exact number, and we really are trying to move 5 kids to deal with the racial imbalance. And if you look at the numbers, that's pretty expensive per kid every year, $70,000 per kid to move. And I feel that we can possibly spend that money more effectively, or be more creative in finding something that's a little more cost effective to address our issue that's over there. And in the meantime, since pre-K busing isn't even required, nor is the pre-K program, I think it is wonderful that we are providing a pre-K program to start with. I understand the difficulties in changing path from where we are, given our commitment to the state to try to find a solution. So arguing the pre-K program right now is not really on the table, nor is it practical. However, the pre-K busing is not required either. And that is a significant number, and I would rather reinvest that into a world language program that will impact all of the students in this district as they come up going forward, clearly, than invested in pre-K busing, which to me is a very ineffective solution to what we're trying to do. I don't know if it's ineffective. It's been effective in some years. It's not the most efficient methodology. I think we can possibly do better. I'd like to stew on that, but in the meantime, if we can add world language while we're doing the other world language all together, I think it's less disruptive for our district, and I think it would create something that's truly wonderful here and give us the opportunity to start from scratch and grow it.
Mr. Llewellyn, you seconded it?
I did, thank you. I think the premise here, Ms. Lou McCormick just pointed out, is to restore programs that were cut back in 2011 to those levels. And what the intent of some of these cuts was to try and not touch teaching, to touch things that might not necessarily have as big of an impact on you know, that relationship between teacher and student in terms of the ratio. And so if we were to kind of quickly jump down the list, we've got color copying budget. I believe there's a $90,000 worth of color copying, and you know, 3 or 4 years ago, I think everyone survived without it. That's a luxury, not a need, if you're going to be able to replace that with an academic program. The busing, Ms. McCormick has already addressed. The carpet, I think that is, you know, something that may be able to be delayed in both situations. The key unification, once again, you know, these are capital items that are not necessarily impacting student learning. And then when we get down to the 2 administrator positions, you'll notice that nothing was cut in terms of, or proposed. We didn't propose reducing the additions, the growth in the teachers at the high school level or any of the paraprofessionals. That was actually never discussed. What we said is, you know, do we need more administrators at this point? And I heard, you know, what was said before, and as I discussed last night, I had suggested that we might be well suited to have an audit of the program to ensure that we're actually delivering the best services with the dollars. But by what we end up hearing last night for the first time was that we have a reorganization that came to us the first time in this budget book, and I think that the change probably deserves a full board discussion to understand. You guys, the administrators have obviously spent a lot of time looking at the services, how they're delivered, whether or not they're being adequately delivered, and looking to develop a better delivery system. And I'm not questioning that at all, but I feel we as a board should have time to understand how the administration got there, and the public should understand it too, because it is a service that's being provided to all kids. It's the money that's being allocated and supported, and I think we need to support the program. We just need to know how it's being done. I don't think we need that audit, because my understanding is that the information we need is readily available in the strategic school profile that's actually submitted by the district to the state, not necessarily the way it's aggregated and that comes back to us, but under state statute. And I know
Mr. Llewellyn, I don't think either the strategic school profile or the audit is part of this motion. So if you could...
It is because I'm
Could you
talking
speak to
about...
the motion that are the cuts in the ads, please?
Thank you for the input. I'm speaking to why the administrators are there, and not teaching staff. But in terms of the state statute, annually we need to look at what's submitted to the Commission of the Education in the Strategic School Profile for each school under its jurisdiction and for the school as a district. The superintendent of each, I'm reading the statute, the superintendent of each local and regional school district
The
shall
strategic
present...
school profile is not part of this motion, so please speak to the motion.
Okay. And the reason I'm saying is I don't think we need the audit. We can go with that. So that's the justification for the reductions. The other piece is if we look, and we didn't get to this because it was put off of the last budget, or the last board meeting, we are right now, as of December 30th, according to our financial report, $1,670,000 ahead of budget on teaching staff. So if, in fact, the administration felt as though they wanted, after a presentation, to restore those spots, there's plenty of room in salary expense under the current budget, and that number has remained relatively constant or growing over the last 3 years. So we can readdress that after we've had a chance to assess.
Thank you. I think, Mrs. Gerber, you had the next hand up?
Yeah, I guess I had a question. I don't know if it'd be for Mr. Rafferty or Dr. Boyce, just in terms of world language in elementary. I guess
through Dr. Title.
Through Dr. Title to Mr. Rafferty. I guess it would be about world language in second, third, and fourth and fifth grade. I guess the question being, would there be problems with the curriculum if it was rolled out as the district is proposing it, with sixth grade coming in 15, 16, and then going backwards? Is that a curriculum issue? I don't know which one of you would be best to address that, but I'd just like to hear from someone who actually, develops the curriculum.
The way we're developing the curriculum that we're going to be presenting to the board in May is level 10, which is the first year of the language, as it's taught in high school, would be offered in grades 6 and 7. It would be offered over 2 years. As we continue to add world languages to the elementary grades over time, I foresee a time when level 10 will probably be just a 6th grade course, because the students coming into grade 6 will have the knowledge and the foundation in the language, at least in Spanish, that they'll be able to complete the first year of the language in grade 6. But that's a few years down the road. It's going to take students coming to us who have started in kindergarten and worked their way up, who are ready to do that. So the upper level curriculum will not need to be rewritten if we follow the implementation as we currently have it planned, because we have curriculum written from grades levels 10 through AP. So that won't change. So what we have written so far is curriculum starting in grade 4. And so we'll be presenting grades 4 through 12 to you in May. What we have not done any curriculum work on would be the curriculum prior to grade 4. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, that does in part, but I guess the other question then would be, if again we went backwards as we had discussed back in November when we had this presented to us, and if you then go back to 2nd grade and 3rd grade, would you need to then revise the 4th and 5th grade?
There would be some. It wouldn't be a major revision because of the students would be getting the language instruction for a very limited amount of time. It's really more of an introduction and a basic knowledge of the language, but especially verbally for the younger children. And so there might be some adjustment, but the biggest adjustment, I believe, would happen in the 6th grade, when the level 10 would eventually be offered in 1 year instead of over 2. So there'd be some minor tweaking of the curriculum over time, but because it's 2 or 3 times a week for 25 minutes, whatever it is in elementary, that's what it is in middle, I don't see it as a major revision.
Right. So basically, if the board chose to follow what was proposed to us in November, it would not result in major changes, having to keep going back to the curriculum to revise it as each grade was added on.
That's correct. Our plan was over time we would have to be tweaking or adjusting the grades 4 and 5 curriculum as we added the grades prior to it, but those would not be major revisions.
Okay. All right, thank you. That's very helpful.
Other questions from the board?
Oh, actually, I just had one other follow-up. Yeah. Well, I guess, and I'm sorry, not for you, Dr. Boyce. Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, yeah, go ahead.
So she defers to you.
Thank you. So does this mean they would be taking the AP exam younger, in a earlier grade?
Eventually, that's very possible. Yeah, it would be possible. Yes.
Okay, and we've sort
those
of
language. I'm sorry, and just
On the
those
same
language
topic,
in
or-
Spanish and French.
And then Mr. Fadbian had been sort of touching on this topic in November, and Mrs. Gerber just did as well. And I don't want to belabor it, so I'll just ask it one more time. I'm unclear on what are they learning then if we're not having to change the curriculum?
In the elementary?
Right.
A lot of what happens in elementary are verbal skills, the basic greetings, some vocabulary development, a little bit of cultural understanding. But especially for younger children, they'll be learning how to speak to each other in the language. When we present the curriculum, you're going to see that the curriculum is broken down into communication and cultural aspects, communication being both verbal and written. And so the younger children are communicating more verbally, and as they get older, they also start to learn how to write the language, which means they learn the grammar, the written grammar that goes with the language. So the earlier years are really stressing having conversations, having dialogues with each other, expanding their vocabulary, maybe learning a little bit about verb tenses, but it's the heavy grammar use develops over time and not in the very young ages.
Feel free to put grammar at the younger ages too. But one other thing is that, and I'm
On
just
the same topic
Same
that-
topic. I'm just unfamiliar with this because I can't remember. Students who in middle school would be getting reading instruction instead of world language, are they doing world language in elementary school, or is that an additional opportunity for reading?
I'd have to ask Mr. Rafferty that question.
Sorry, I was thinking of something else in my head that I wanted to say related to this, but I missed the question.
So my question was, in the middle school, I understand that when I believe the majority of the students are taking world language instruction, those students who need additional reading help, that they are not taking world language, they are getting reading assistance. Is that the same protocol in elementary school?
Well, in elementary school, we have a lot more flexibility, so I wouldn't say that it's an either or situation.
Okay, so
a child could take reading and world language, but under this proposal, you've just added in fourth and fifth 80 more minutes of instruction that has to come out of the core, which would be a challenge to meet that.
And so then my question is that do we have the current staffing in place to take care of that reading instruction time, or does that need to be another ad? And again, I know I don't know that you know these numbers offhand, but that seems to me a very real possibility.
Well, one of the things we had talked about before, being able to audit and understand that I couldn't answer that question without going into each school individually and being able to articulate what kind of staffing need would precipitate it.
Okay.
Can I add one other thing that has not been brought up? If you add the
Please
curriculum to the lower grades, you only added a teacher. You didn't add any money for curriculum development. And if you really were worried about the continuum, we should build enough curriculum money to build a map from kindergarten up. I didn't prepare those costs, but if we wanted to do it right and not worry about the continuum, when we bring those teachers in to write the curriculum, we bring in the world language teachers to build the whole thing, then we implement it over time. But we haven't put that money on the table.
Thank you.
I guess just to piggyback on that then, so would there also be costs for, say, materials or books or anything like that?
Absolutely.
So there'd be curriculum development costs and books or materials
Yes.
in addition to the costs which we have on here.
Well, we don't use a textbook in elementary school to do world language,
Right.
but
there would be
we
materials.
need world language materials,
Right,
yes.
exactly. Okay, thank you.
So other board members that wish to
Oh,
make a
well,
comment?
just on this, or because I still had one other question
Oh,
on
I'm
another
sorry,
topic.
if you have other questions that you want to ask.
Yeah, I guess through,
On the motion.
yes.
Yes, right.
Is it, I can't remember, is it through you or is it through Dr. Title to Mrs. Leonardi, to Miss Leonardi?
Superintendent.
Through the superintendent to Miss Leonardi.
I never understood what that meant, actually.
Mr. Fattabine?
Anybody understand that?
I think that's past practice. Do you understand that?
Yeah, so I guess regarding these, the two administrative positions, and I think unfortunately we always have this, perception that administrators kind of sit in rooms and don't have any direct interaction with students. So I was just wondering if you could perhaps explain in some way how these two administrative positions impact student achievement, student learning, have a positive impact on our special ed students and the students at Walter Fitzgerald.
Special ed administration is really about, if you think about special education and the focus on individualization, special ed administrators are able to work with not only the big picture, so driving through. We've heard commentary about the need, and the need I agree with, to move forward a scientifically research-based reading program, K-12, for students who are struggling readers. In order to do that, you need people with both leadership skill and expertise in reading. We've heard parents say, well, is this going to lead to certification? Well, it should. But without leadership driving not only the professional development, but the job-embedded professional development and the accountability phase of that in all likelihood will take much longer to happen and will happen less effectively. We've seen that over time. So that's a piece of what these people do. Engaging when a team, often a team around an individual child with significant special needs, is dealing with 8 or 10 different professionals who come from different perspectives, parents who come from the parent perspective, and it's important, sometimes those teams get stuck. They're too close to the day-to-day operations for the child, and they get stuck. And so what we do as special ed administrators is we can come in and help facilitate real conversation and dialogue about focusing the needs of students, focusing and understanding what their needs are, and clear those log jams so that teams can get back to the business of student achievement for that child. Additionally, we provide technical experience. I've been working with children with vast arrays of special needs for 30 years. When I work with a teacher who may be in their second year of teaching and have students with autism and cerebral palsy and traumatic brain injuries and emotional disturbances and learning disabilities and language disorders all on their caseload, I can help them to engage in ways that a building principal can't. And so having the ready expertise. Unfortunately now, teachers who call any one of the 4 of us on any given day, we're typically putting out fires all day. We're in meetings, we're in PPTs, we're in legal proceedings. We can't get to them to help. And that doesn't support that child or that family. We've just hit the 30-year mark for special ed, the federal legislation. And the first generation of special ed teachers are starting to retire. So we're hiring new teachers, young teachers who need us. The building principals work very hard, and they try very hard to support young teachers. But new special ed teachers need us. They don't come out of their bachelor's programs with the skills necessary to work at the levels Fairfield expects. And that is not a diss on our teachers. They're extraordinary young people who are working very hard, but they need our support to be successful. So while I may not often sit directly with a student trying to teach them to read, I have students and parents and faculty members on the phone in my office. I'm with them in their schools, as are the other 3 administrators who work. Not having access to us more readily does not serve the students of Fairfield who have special needs. And quite frankly, when those teams are stuck and we can't get there, it pulls the resources of the building administration away from doing their work in instructional leadership with the teachers of reading and the teachers of math everywhere else. So not having the level of support and having us spread as thinly as we are is really detrimental to the overall instructional program for individuals and groups of children with disabilities. I understand that for whatever reason Fairfield has a belief that administrators don't affect student achievement. I can't disagree with that more. And there are parents who will wait for our attention far too long. And that results in everything you heard. So I understand that we want everything and we don't want to pay for everything. But I think this is, while I don't disagree that world language needs its fair share, I don't think it should be on the backs of not providing and not allowing the special education program to move forward with the leadership it requires.
Right. Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, I feel like, we're talking about, trying not to impact programs, and I would say not funding these administrative positions, even though they are the awful administrator word, I think is really very short-sighted, so thank you.
Thank you. Other comments before we go to the public? Mrs. Maxon Kennelly.
Just while you're still here, and I have a few other comments, but just to piggyback on Mrs. Gerber, having sat in PPT meetings, one thing I'm not sure if everyone's aware of, just so that you can confirm what I'm saying, you can't have a PPT meeting without an administrator present, correct?
There's a function in the law that allows for a designee, but that designee has to be able to allocate district resources.
Right.
And that we don't allocate that, that possibility out. They have to be able to
You don't
answer.
delegate that possibility.
They have to be able to spend the district's money. And so we require that an administrator be present.
Right, because I've never been in a PPT that didn't. You also have to have the PPT or these types of reviews upon parental request.
Correct.
So these are needs that the public can ask, will require of the district, and will require an administrative time, and that without the proper staffing for that, we are taking building principals, and they have to fulfill this function.
Correct.
And I wouldn't doubt that that is increasingly happening. We've heard the rising numbers, and we've heard the more complex issues, which means the meetings last longer and involve more staff. I'm very torn about a lot of these items, and I think we've all enjoyed the world language proposal that we received in November and believe in it. But I likewise would have a very difficult time doing it on the backs of these students, and also the at-risk. I mean, Walter Fitzgerald is there for at-risk students. And to think that just because someone is an administrator who might have a few hours in his or her day available, that's not what those students need. And that's also truly some hands-on work there,
I would say it's
having
a few
worked with
hours in
students at risk.
his or her week. Not to interrupt you, I have to be clear that the leadership happening for Walter Fitzgerald is a few hours within his or her week, not day. We're talking about minimal time each week for an administrator to step foot, put out fires, deal with crisis intervention, and then deal with the teacher evaluation system. That's all they do there. They can't do real program development and program leadership. And so the money we're spending there is just, they're great teachers, and they're good people, and they want to do good work, but the kids they have real needs, and they need to look at what those kids need as future thinkers, not as past thinkers. And that's not going to happen without some leadership.
Thank you.
No, you're done. Shall we go? Mr. Fatterbean, Mr. Patton, Mrs. Lou McCormick, and can I say that's the round, and we'll go to the public? Is that?
I'm going to have more, but
You'll have more.
I'll see if somebody else
Maybe
covers it.
after the public, we can always continue conversation on this. Yes, Mr. Fatterbean.
I guess to the chair, to Ms. Leonardi. I guess could you explain to me how the Walter Fitzgerald campus, my understanding is a dean assigned there. Is that a full-time dean position, or is that a part-time dean position?
If you pull the microphone closer to you, Paul, that might help.
I apologize.
There's a teacher-level dean who works at the Walter Fitzgerald campus, and their primary responsibility is to manage the in-school suspension system and the disciplinary system of the school. So we have students, these are students who have, when they arrive to us, they're very, very disenfranchised from typical education. And they have difficulties sustaining high levels of student engagement. Engagement is a primary issue, and so we don't want to suspend them out of school. Often these kids use out-of-school suspension as a way to escape the demands of academia that they've failed in so readily across the rest of the system. And so the dean keeps the kids in school and does a lot of working with the students when they're removed from class for disciplinary reasons. They work on, it's not that they teach, but they teach not a core curriculum subject. They teach kids how to learn to manage their behavior. While they're wonderful people and they do really good work, they don't provide overall program design leadership. That's not what his function is. He doesn't do teacher evaluation. He can't do, when kids have serious disciplinary infractions, the leader has to be there to address that. But it's really taking the whole. We have some young teachers. There's been some retirements out of the Walter Fitzgerald campus. For years, for about 30 years, they had a core staff that stayed and never left. Now we've had retirements in that core staff, and we have young, brand new first-year teachers, and we have to engage them in what does it mean to be an alternative school? What does it mean to be alternative? How do you create learning experiences that are different from the ones these kids have faced and failed in all the way along? We've instituted new online learning programs. It's probably the school in the district who's really worked on online learning to allow for those kids to have experiences and electives that they wouldn't necessarily have. They definitely wouldn't have at the Walter Fitzgerald campus because we only have core teachers. So this program needs an infusion of future thinking. And we know that if they had the capacity, we could really move things forward. But unfortunately, since I was the first one who took it over when they moved out of the high school. When they moved out of the high school building, they had a housemaster who was assigned to them. So there was someone at least on site every day. When they moved out, it was given to me to now be the administrator of that program. Frankly, I couldn't give them the time they needed. Gail Donowitz, who's our current secondary coordinator, who was in the audience, I think she's still here, she can't give them the time they need and do the job we have on the special ed side. And so the program it's there, it runs. These people still work really hard to do good work, but we should invest in it. It is a program that could do extraordinary work for kids who really need it. But without the leadership, it's just not going to happen.
That answer your question, Mr. Bedouin? The
Well,
answer
that
is,
and more.
Okay. The answer is yes, Mr. Patton.
On the simple side, things like color copying, Dr. Title, budgets to the use, we've already cut that stuff like that, as he said before. And you want a budget book in black and white and your capital improvement projects in black and white, don't go anywhere, Ms. Leonardi, you're next. Thank you.
Thank you.
Then,
do you have a question that you're making?
Yeah, I will. So I'm going to kind of throw some of that out there, and then I want to move on to the special education stuff. So I just think that's short-sighted because we're going to end up having to try and find that money because we're going to end up spending it anyways. The pre-K busing, the pre-K program, as has been explained, was in place before the racial imbalance. So the transportation issue is a bigger issue. You can't just take it away blanketly like that. And suddenly kids, for a year or so have transportation, and then suddenly they don't. That's certainly not fair. We're giving them no warning whatsoever. As to the adjustment in administrators between Walter Fitzgerald and the special education program, certainly, going to the renaming of the Walter Fitzgerald campus and speaking to the students there and hearing their stories of how life was for them before they got there and after they'd been there for a while, and some had just gotten there, and they just expressed the immense amount of improvements in their attitude towards life and their futures that campus provides. And I think that having a full-time administrator there will help to the needs of those kids that we didn't have before. As to the special education, breaking down the coordinators to more concise roles and specific responsibilities from elementary, middle and high school, I can't tell you, certainly not voluntary. I've had dozens and dozens of conversations with parents who have emailed and cold called me randomly with special needs children, to whether it's to advocate for their children, to ask questions on procedures, to just bend ear. And as recently as today, I spent a half hour of time I should have been working at work, talking to one parent who requested that I advocate immensely for the adjustments that Ms. Leonardi has created. And for one of the simple reasons that she just mentioned. Parents wait far too long. In this particular instance, and I've heard the same case many times over this fall, parents with kids that have needs, they go to the administration, they request changes, they request help, and they don't know what to do. And this change in how the program is structured will allow kids to get identified earlier, the district to waste less money, parents to waste less time. We always hear about the legal fees. Parents don't want to get lawyers involved, but sometimes when they don't get responses quickly, they're like, well, I'm just going to get my lawyer involved. That happens. That's why legal fees have gone through the roof in the last 2 years for things like that. So this is an attempt to adjust all those things. So to mess with this after, I think this is brilliant the way it was reorganized. It doesn't cost a lot of money, and it just helps the district on so many levels. And the children, now, current, and future, who have special needs, need this system. So I'm not for any of those cuts. I'll just do it all at once. As to world language, I've been advocating for more world language since before I was on this board. I would love to see second and third grade have more world language a couple of days a week. I would love to have fourth and fifth grade go back to the way it was, because my own children have experienced the reduction, and they basically said they don't get a heck of a lot out of it. But I think the plan that the World Language Curriculum Leader and Dr. Boyce and Mr. Rafferty have put together for us, and we'll see the details in the spring, in terms of rolling this out, is not only a smart fiscal decision, I think it's a smart educational decision. We don't know what the impact is going to be taking time away from core subjects in elementary school. So that's got to be carefully done. So to throw this in there right now when we have no plan, forget the extra cost of materials and all that. That's dollars and cents, and I'm not for adding items to the budget, regardless. I would love to, but that's never in the cards. So I just think it's smart to kind of stick with the plan that was created, and we'll see in the spring how that should be rolled out, hopefully.
Thank you. Mrs. Lou McCormick, would you like to make your last comments, or would you like to go to the public first? It's your motion.
Yeah, I'll make one comment.
Thank you.
All right, so the one perception that I think concerns me is this funding one item on the backs of other students. I think that is a very divisive way to look at things, and I think, in fact, that is not at all what is trying to be accomplished by this.
Are you addressing the board, Mrs. Lou McCormick?
What?
Are you addressing the
I'm
board?
addressing everybody, because it's been.
But this, if you would address the
Well,
board.
I can look over at the television if I want to. And so, at the end of the day, I actually believe that the world language and the other programs that were cut in 2011, they funded other programs. We cut from programs to fund other programs. I am not here asking for growth of these new programs. This is actually trying to restore programs that the students of this town had before, that was taken away from them to fund other things. And apparently, things that other people valued more than world language, more than the gifted programs, more than the music. And I understand that, and maybe at that time it made sense. But at this time, when I look at this budget again, there are things that I would prioritize these student programs above, because students are being directly impacted. This is instructional time. This is direct instructional time to thousands of students. And to me, there's nothing more important than for us as parents, as Board of Ed members, as to protect the programs that educate our students from day to day. We have taken an oath to try to prepare our students to perform and to be and to thrive in the 21st century. The 21st century world language is extremely important. These pull-out programs for gifted, people mock them. I don't understand why. They are students too, like all the other students.
Could you address the board, please?
Well,
This
when
is
I
a
hear
board
people
debate.
laughing in
This
the
is
audience.
a board debate. Don't
That's
focus on the
I
public.
understand. I can be, and you should be actually asking people to restrain themselves.
Please just continue your presentation. If I think the public is getting too
Well, again,
loud,
this is
then I will address that.
Okay, well, I'm addressing it. And at the end of the day, I actually believe that the music program and the world language program that affect thousands of students is just as important as these other programs that you have. And I'm not saying that they are more or less important, but I want to restore them to at least where they were before, because things were taken away from other students, thousands of students, and they feel it every day. And I think that the longer we wait, I think the more it impacts more students, and there's no need for that. I think we can correct it. We took $500,000 away from world language, or something in that neighborhood. In the new recommendation, while I appreciate that we're trying to restore something, we're only restoring $180,000. Under what I have proposed, bringing it back to third grade, we would restore a little over $500,000. I'm trying to restore what was taken away. The other programs as well, they had monies allocated to them and it was taken away. So talking about groups that were impacted and funding things on their back, these are groups that were impacted. And all I'm saying is that let's restore it back to them before we grow other new programs. Let's at least restore what we had before. Thousands of students will benefit from it. I can't see why we wouldn't consider this very seriously when we are looking at capital items that can be easily delayed. They can be easily delayed. And you know what? If we introduce kids now to language, that can have a lasting impact on their ability to learn a language forever. So I think these are very important. And while I agree that the administrative staff, it's very important to run an organization with a strong administrative staff. But I have to say that the student programs that touch the students, to me, are golden. And we have to protect them. And every opportunity we have to restore and protect these student programs for our kids, we should take. And, you know, I hate to sacrifice one thing for another, but we have a dean, we have something that's operating, it's not falling apart. You're doing a great job over there. If we delay it for a year to get this program on the ground and running, and then we review it again next year, and maybe we've had more time to think about ways to improve it or other investments, we are investing inside the special ed area heavily, and I see for good reason. But we also need to invest in other areas. We have to invest in other areas as well. We have thousands of students. We don't just have hundreds of students. We have thousands of students. And I want to emphasize that world language and these other programs that have been cut deserve their time back.
Thank you. So if I can go to the public and then we'll come back to the board. This is on the amendment and the amendment only. Hopefully you followed the various line items that we highlighted so that you can comment on the amendment and the amendment only. Please state your name and address.
Suzanne Miska, 123 Rygate Road. What I'm watching and what I'm listening to kind of goes back to what I was originally talking about this evening, which is, you know, if you don't provide a description of what it is that we're attempting to do, then it's really hard. It becomes a numbers game. It's this number versus that number. You know, I think the problem here is if you don't understand a program, and unfortunately I feel, and in no disrespect to the superintendent, we do a really bad job of educating everyone on what we do. And if we're doing something well, we should be bringing it forth. You know, my problem is that I agree world language is important. We added LA time when we took it away, and yet there's been no assessment review as to how that has helped us with instructional time. On the special ed program, honestly, if you were to ask most parents who don't have children with special needs, we don't understand the program. I've learned a lot this evening about the program, but we need to have a better understanding of how that is. These might be the greatest things to implement, but if we don't appreciate the program to begin with, how can you decide what number values and what one doesn't? In the case of Walter Fitzgerald, I know where it is. I know nothing about it. It would be so helpful if we can have a discussion on the special ed program, on the Walter Fitzgerald program. I think we have to do an analysis of what we've got out there, show what we're doing well and why we need to go in these directions before we put things in a budget book and ask people to make decisions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other members of the public wish to come forward and talk about the amendment and the amendment only? Please state your name and address.
I'm back. Kelly McWinney, 947 Churchill Road. Just two very quick things. Okay. Professionally, I was a teacher. I stay at home right now. Teachers will always feel free to tell you when there are too many administrators. Fairfield is not heavy in administrators. Where I worked, in every elementary school, there was a principal, an assistant principal who focused on curriculum, and an assistant principal who focused on special ed in that school alone. So we do not have too many administrators, especially dealing with the special ed population. Secondly, if you believe in the world language program, put the money back in without taking it from special ed. Just put it in. If it's something that you believe so strongly about, it doesn't have to be a switch. Feel free to put it in. But I feel like we're trying to please a very small group of people who just wants to see cuts. And I think we all know who I'm talking about. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Please state your name and an address.
Christine Vitale, 254 Vernon Hill Road. I'm going to ask you to please not support this amendment. I think it covers so many items that I think would be very irresponsible to pass it. I mean, forget about the special ed. You're talking about transportation. There's just so many items that have not been given due diligence by this board. I feel that they have been given due diligence by those with expertise, our educators, the people that we are paying to make these decisions. And I support world languages. I support the gifted program. Not happy about what happened to it. I think that we need to look at the middle school gifted program. I don't think that just throwing money at it is going to solve the problem. I think it needs to be looked at comprehensively. Hopefully when looking at the United Arts programs, because work does need to be done there. Those students deserve services as well. I don't think they should be marginalized. And it should not be one against the other. But as the previous speaker said, if you really are passionate about these items, put the money in the budget, get out in front of the Board of Selectmen, the Board of Finance, the RTM, and advocate for it, like so many parents have been doing for years. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anybody else wish to come forward and speak? State your name and address.
Stephen Scheinberg, 15 Flax Road. My youngest is in college, so I do not have any children in the schools in Fairfield. And congratulations on Fairfield getting a nice report today for the public schools, for the elementary schools. Mr. Chairman, thank you for your outstanding leadership. Members of the board, thank you for your commitment and your service.
This is on the amendment.
And Dr. Title, thank you for your outstanding leadership and professionalism. I am against this amendment. As previous people stated, if you're for world language, put it in the budget. And I think it's very poor planning to ask to put back into the budget money for world language and then look ad hoc for money to cut. And it's poor planning, and you state that you don't want to put one group against the other, but that's what you're doing with your motion. So I ask the board, I appeal to the board to reject this motion. It hasn't been thought out, hasn't been planned, and it is not good for the schools. I'm here to advocate for the future for the schools, and thank you for your service.
Any other member of the public wish to come forward? A stranger? Please state your name and address.
Greg Hatzis, headmaster of Fairfield Ludlow High School. With the heavy emphasis of items from Fairfield Ludlow High School, you think I was here to actually advocate on their behalf, but actually I'm here because the budget adjustment proposal that that I worry about the most is the one about the special education administrators. I can tell you as a building administrator, with the number of initiatives that we are facing, some of them self-imposed, but also with state and federal mandates, whether it be SBAC testing, whether it be the teacher evaluation plan, our school improvement efforts, data collection, all of those things, we are faced with a time crunch. We need help with special education. I can tell you that in my own career, students with special needs have had the greatest positive impact on my life in terms of shaping my philosophy of education. So it's not about lack of passion or wanting to help and wanting to deal with all of the issues around special education. But with the time commitment that spreads us so thin, we do need that assistance. And so while I'm here about the other projects, I will just happen to mention the one that I do want to talk about is student parking lighting. I will say that what has happened over the years.
That is not
that
on
is not
this
there.
list.
Okay, I apologize. Sorry. Well, then the keys. No, I'm just kidding.
No. Thank you very much. Yes, thank you very much. Anybody else coming forward? If not, back to the board. Can I go around this way and get one last set of comments, and then we'd be ready for a vote? We do have other items that we need to address and whatnot. Mr. Llewellyn.
Sure. Thank you. I think, we've all had a good education here today, and I think what we're hearing from a lot of parents, and I think we're learning is it's fundamentally the process here that may be as broken as anything else, because we're given a book a week ago, and we're asked to review it, a week and a half ago. What day did we get the book? Does anyone know? 13th. We got the book on the 13th, okay. So we were given 2 weeks to review 100 and some odd pages and get through the data. We had our second session on it yesterday, but there's a lot that is in here, and had we known that there was going to be a restructuring and we could have heard about all the benefits, we could have incorporated that, but it's placed upon us. So I think that what might be helpful, and at least to this board member and hopefully to all of you, would be that we get a better understanding, and as I said before, we possibly use the strategic school profile to go through and evaluate how we've done, because it's got the information in it. So I guess I'm going to say through the chair, I'd like to get a sense of the body to put on the agenda for the next regular meeting.
This is, I have to remind you, you're speaking to the amendment and the amendment only.
Okay.
Not future agenda items.
That's okay. There we go. But I do think we need to bring it in front of the board here to really get a better understanding.
Thank you. Mrs. Maxon-Connelly, any further comments that you wish to make? Or are you ready for a vote?
No, I've got a few comments.
Thank you.
Several things. This was initially in order, and then I started tacking them on, so I apologize for this being disorganized. First, regarding the time issue, I don't disagree with Mr. Llewellyn that 2 weeks is a compressed time, but then I'll also remind the board that this started back in September when we got the budget overview. We got the budget manual. We had initial general input on what was being worked on. We knew in November that the world language was coming up. We also know, and I know I did this back in my first year on the board, I had a lot more questions then. There was a lot in this book I didn't understand, and I asked Dr. Title, could I meet with you? Instant. I spent a couple of hours in there, and that is part of our board responsibility. This is not a surprise. It's January. We know we have the town charter to fulfill. We have a budget that we have to turn over tomorrow. This is not a news flash. Okay, the snow was a surprise, but nothing else in this part has been. We don't want the budget book sooner, because then what we would find ourselves doing is saying we need more accurate information in order to make these decisions. So I do not agree that the process is flawed here. We ran for this office knowing that this was what happens in January, unless you paid no attention to the Board of Ed, in which case that's a separate issue in terms of your candidacy. But this is a known thing.
Please
so
speak to
one,
the
in
motion.
terms of process. Secondly, just a reminder, as we just had someone reference once again, Walter Fitzgerald as a special ed program. It is not. Unfortunately, what had happened is that it gets conflated because we have a special ed administrator who's dropping in there. Those need to be divided. Those are two very different needs. We also had a reference from the public regarding how do we know that this increased language instruction has proven and of any value. Through the chair to Dr. Title or perhaps to Mr. Rafferty. Can anybody, or I saw Mr. Chiappetta hiding in the back at some point. Have our CMT scores gone up in reading?
Yes.
Thank you. That to me is one direct metric evaluating and demonstrating that increased reading instruction has had a payoff. That's one thought. Secondly, actually I believe I'm on fourthly, not that that exists, but again, we do have to get away from the idea, and I had written down the same comment that several people up here had stated, that if you're going to restore, then that's when it is accurate to state we are not doing it on the backs. But in fact, we are making a choice. On the other hand, I also appreciate this is a little bit of the Scylla and Charybdis for Mrs. Lou McCormick. Last year, she tried to do it in good faith of doing a straight ad of something that she believed in, and that became an immediate target of the town. So I understand the idea of wanting to have the trade-off, but unfortunately, this is now a trade-off for students who are very needy, and I'm not willing to support that. Some other items that are on here. There was also a comment made regarding Walter Fitzgerald, and this is a quote, "We're doing a great job over there." And yet the administrator who has spent a great deal of time there, Mrs. Leonardi, said very explicitly, we are not. We are doing okay. But for these students at risk, and we are here to work on behalf of engaging all students, we need to do better there. We are not doing a great job there, and it would be incorrect to let that statement stand. It's also incorrect to have any implication that we are not moving this district forward in terms of program. What we have done in the 6th grade world language program is a significant financial investment, is a significant programmatic investment. I'm very proud of that. I completely agree. I wish we had the money to do it all and just roll it all out. But we know that that would not be received by the other town bodies as being fiscally responsible, so we are doing it in steps. Secondly, regarding pre-K, if we're going to cut the busing, then we need a direct conversation on what we're going to do about racial imbalance. To just say, and again I quote, we can possibly do better. Having sat on the Cultural Diversity Task Force for years and having wrestled with exactly that issue, I promise you, we went through everything in years of meetings, and you saw where, now again, we had it with a zero-cost mandate, so we couldn't do anything that was going to cost money. Ultimately, this was what came up with as being the most cost-effective. So that was a special ad hoc committee charged with that. So to just throw out there, we can do better, then let's have that discussion, and we can recreate some of the work that that committee already did, and let's address, are we going to come up with a more radical solution? Don't just cut the busing and not acknowledge you are directly impacting what was one of the recommendations of that task force. Have that discussion. Also regarding teacher prep, I'm still unclear on what that $40,000 is for. I completely agree with every comment that middle school needs to be better for gifted and talented, but let's also look back at the numbers which Mrs. Lou McCormick brought up yesterday. I was also a little bit troubled at those numbers of 7% for 5th grade and the higher percentages in the other grades, and then I took a step back and realized what is supposed to be the national average for actual gifted. My recollection, please, if anyone can chime in and correct me if I'm wrong, it's in the neighborhood of what, 3%? 3.7%. So in fact, what is wrong with our methodology that we have so many? I know Fairfield Special, I work in Greenwich, same idea. But in fact, those numbers are wrong. And now the discussion I'd like to have is it a gifted and talented program? Answer, no. And instead, is it really is it a challenge program? In which case, let's call it what it is and change the structure of it. But that's a much fuller discussion that maybe we need to commit ourselves to. And so, yeah, that's my page of notes. So,
thank you. Mr. Fattabine, anything that you'd like to make as a final comment?
Well, just at this point in time, I'm not likely to support any of the additional cuts or the additions.
Thank you very much for your brevity, especially. Mr. Convertito.
Not so lucky with me. I can't support this amendment, and I'm going to run through the reasons why. One, I'm sorry. One, the amendment takes $120,000 out of capital expenditure and simply defers it, which means next year we're going to have X plus $120,000. Okay, and it replaces it with a recurring budget item. Okay, so we're going to be X plus $120,000 plus X plus $456,000 on a recurring basis at a time when we're trying to fight for every dollar we have. As far as eliminating the preschool busing program, that essentially eliminates that entire preschool program, okay? Because the people that are getting bused there are the reason why we had the program in the first place. So if we want to have the discussion about a different way to solve the racial imbalance, then let's have that, and I more than welcome that discussion, okay? It's not the time to have it is not at the 11th hour, okay? And as far as the Walter Fitzgerald campus and a special ed coordinator, it is becoming, what is laid out for me is a choice between the two, okay? And we have an education gap in this district, okay? And this, as far as the program that's been put forward through the district, I think goes a long way to start to solving that educational gap, okay? I'm more than happy to talk about gifted programs and adding those to the budget and so forth, and I'll be more than happy to have that, but I can't have it be a choice between the two. So I can't support this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. One of the roles of the chair is to facilitate discussion. Sometimes I don't ask questions or comments because I find that if I allow more time for my 8 colleagues to do so, virtually all of the comments and questions get addressed. But I'll just make 2 comments. I believe in the pre-K program by itself. The fact that that also helps us address racial imbalance, we get 2 benefits. And I've watched 3 or 4 different boards try to address racial imbalance and all come back to this as the most cost-effective way. The special ed comments have been made, which I agree with. Last November, I was convinced that the staff had presented a very well thought-out approach to reinvigorating world language on a methodical basis over several years. I think we ought to stay with that. And I agree with the comments that people have made that you don't do program design at the board level. I think that's an instructional methodology issue, that's why we have professional certified teachers and superintendents, and especially doing it at a board table as part of a budget-making process, I think is fraught with just a lot of problems. So I will not be supporting this amendment. Mrs. Gerber.
Yeah, well, I guess you touched on one thing. I was just going to talk about the pre-K and just say that while, yes, of course, it does help with the racial imbalance, I think it's a little disingenuous to say that only 5 students are positively impacted by the pre-K program because there are a number of students in Fairfield who benefit from this program in a number of different ways. So I think that it's very important to keep that in mind. And also, if we get rid of the busing, as others have stated, we are creating an issue that we would have to discuss in some other way. Now is not the time to do that. And I would also just say, in terms of world language, this is a first step, and if we had not received in November a detailed presentation as to what the plan is in the ensuing years, yes, the idea of doing it in younger grades would be appealing if it hadn't already been discussed, but it has been discussed. It is being worked on by the educational professionals. I'm thrilled that we are getting more than we started with in 6th grade, and I think it's a good first step, and I hope and assume we will continue to go in that direction. So for that reason and others, I will not support this amendment.
Mr. Patton, anything further?
Yeah, I have nothing further.
Thank you. Mr. Fatterbean, I think he beat you out in terms of the length of commentary. Mrs. Lou McCormick, I think you've got the last word, and we'll go to the vote.
None of this surprises me. However, I will stay true to my belief that student programs deserve to have their time, and the ones that were cut, I believe deserve to be restored. Whether that happens this year or in future years, I'll continue to bring them forth because I believe that they need to be discussed. I do not think that they should be forgotten, and unless I bring them forth, they will be forgotten. I'm concerned very realistically with that possibility, and therefore I will continue to bring them forth because we need to discuss, as Ms. Kennelly mentioned, the 3 programs. World language, the gifted, we can reassess music. I was told last year, I recall, that they were going to restructure music so that we could make sure composition was incorporated. I've never heard an update on whether that actually happened within the existing hours that were allocated towards it. I would love an update on the music program and whether composition is reallocated. If it was reallocated, I would say then we don't need to, add extra hours. But if it's not, I will continue to bring it up because I want to get the update on these. The gifted program was cut. What's happening with it? I haven't heard an update. If we don't bring it up at these important meetings and we don't put it on our agendas, they will get lost. And I do not want these very important programs to get lost. When it comes to the pre-K busing program, which I know I've looked at many times, this isn't a surprise. It shouldn't be as if I brought these up at the last hour. A lot of these items were brought up last year. I discussed them in detail. I researched them in detail. I even watched the buses pull in and out, and I counted the kids on them. So this isn't as if this hasn't gone without some thought. And I would not say that the pre-K program benefited only 5 people. That was not the statement at all. It was that 5 kids made the difference between us being racially imbalanced and not, which is a very small factor. And the racial imbalance is what initially drove the pre-K program, or one of the primary driving factors of the pre-K program. Having said that, let's just be clear that our statements of it being very effective are overstated. They have been effective on occasion. Currently, the last report indicates that McKinley School continues to be racially imbalanced and that they are going to review it again, and if it continues to be racially imbalanced, we may need to submit a revision to the plan next year. And therefore, it is not realistic for us to assume that this just solves the problem. It doesn't just solve the problem. We have to continue to think about it. And raising the issue, I think, is a very realistic and practical thing to say that this isn't something that's sprung upon us. We've had now last year and this year to talk about this issue. We should be thinking about it. It is a very real issue. We should be thinking about it practically. I raise it for all of us to discuss, to analyze. Do we really put some of these capital improvements above our student programs that impact our students? How do we prioritize our spending? Of course, I know the majority may turn this down. I'm expecting nothing less. I know that there's a public that doesn't support these. Of course. There's always 2 sides to every discussion. However, I do believe they're important. I will continue to raise them. I hope you share the importance of covering all multi-thousands of kids, whatever 10, 20,000 kids that we have in our district, because all of their needs are important, including the special ed, including the gifted, including the world language, which makes them prepared for the 21st century. I've seen it in real life where there were jobs out there, and the ones that were bilingual were able to do better than the others. They were given certain positions, jobs, elevations within their positions. It's a real world, and I want to make sure that we don't forget that and that we don't forget our duty to defend the programs for our students.
You finished. I was checking to make sure I had the 2 numbers correct. With no further comments, the motion was to remove the line items mentioned, which totaled to $456,845. 470,106. Yes, 470,106, and to add, that's the 456 number. And to add the various line items that were mentioned that would add $456,845. Do the board members understand the line items in the motion that's in front of you? Having no objection, all in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. Mrs. Lou McCormick and Mr. Llewellyn, all opposed. Mr. Patton, Mrs. Gerber, Mr. Dwyer, Mr. Convertito, Mr. Fattabine, Mrs. Maxon Kennelly. The motion fails 2-6. I think everybody else said they had no changes to the budget, and Mr. Llewellyn passed and asked to come back to him. Do you have anything further you would like to add for discussion?
The comment I started to make before about adding something to an agenda, is this an acceptable time for that?
No, we move on the budget. Open board comment would be a good time for you to make that suggestion.
Very good. I'm fine then, thank you.
You're fine. Then we are back to the main motion.
Sorry, I do have one comment.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry. I wasn't going to make any more proposals, but I think, what is readily apparent here is that we need to have a better dialogue earlier in the process. We need to add items to all of the agendas that are business items so that we don't get in the same situation next year, because the agendas have not included some of the topics that tend to be controversial in the town. And I think Ms. Maxim Kennelly said it very well, in that if we can talk about some of these things over the course of the year, we'll be in a better place as a board.
Thank you. We're back to the main motion, and so the number is the number that was proposed. And Mrs. Munsell, if you could read the official number off.
160,848,061.
160.
848.
848.
061.
061. Okay, so the motion that is in front of us is that the Board of Education approve an operating budget for the 2015-16 fiscal year in the amount of $160,848,061 as presented, to be forwarded to the town of Fairfield. Everybody understand the motion? Do we have anybody from the public who has not commented on the main motion at the beginning of the meeting, which wishes to come forward now? Okay. I have to wait every once in a while. There's a photographer in the back that occasionally adjusts the camera, and I don't know whether that person is coming forward. So we have the motion in front of us. Everybody understand it? All in favor of the recommended motion, the budget of $160,848,061, $60,848,000. We have a little shortage. $160,848,061. Please raise your hand in support. Mr. Patton, Mrs. Gerber, Mr. Dwyer, Mr. Convertito, Mr. Fatterbean, Mrs. Maxon Kennelly. All opposed? Mrs. Lou McCormick and Mr. Llewellyn. The budget passes 6-2. So we're on to... Dr. Title would like to make a comment before we move on to the minutes.
Right. I know I've been unusually quiet, but I would like to thank the members of our staff, Ms. Munsell and the team who put this together. It's an incredible effort to put it together. I really would like to thank the members of the public who engaged in the conversation as we went through this process. I'd like to thank the board for the whole discussion and the support of the budget. I look forward to working with all of you, all 9 of you, as we move forward to the next steps in the process. I think it's important that we stay unified as a community advocating for the children. The budget is the #1 way that the town shows its commitment to children and families in Fairfield, in its educational system. And I'll advocate as hard as I can to move this through the town bodies, but I can't do it alone. Nobody can do it alone. And I look forward to doing that, and I appreciate getting through this part of the process. Thank you.
At the risk of not moving on to the next agenda item, I do want to add my own personal thanks to the staff who don't just spend the last couple of weeks. They spend from late summer throughout the fall working on this on our behalf. The next item is the approval of the minutes. The recommended motion is that the Board of Education approve the minutes of the regular meeting of December 9th. Do I have a motion? Mrs. Gerber, do I have a second? Mr. Patton, any discussion on the minutes? If not, all in favor of the minutes, please raise your hand. Mr. Patton, Mrs. Gerber, Mr. Dwyer, Mr. Convertito, Mrs. Maxon Kennelly, opposed? Mrs. Lou McCormick, Mr. Fatterbean, Mr. Llewellyn. Okay. The next item is the approval of the minutes of January 13th, 2015, that the Board of Education approve the minutes of the regular meeting of January 13th, 2015. Do I have a motion? Mrs. Gerber, do I have a second? Mrs. Maxon Kennelly, any discussion on the minutes? Having heard none, all in favor of the minutes of regular meeting of January 13th, 2015, please raise your hand. Mrs. Patton, Mrs. Gerber, Mr. Dwyer, Mr. Convertito, Mrs. Maxon Kennelly, all opposed? Mrs. Lou McCormick, Mr. Fatterbean, Mr. Llewellyn, approved 5-3. What happened to our superintendent? Mrs. Munsell, do you want to start walking us through the quarterly financials?
This should be very quick because you've heard most of this throughout the budget process, and it's in the book. The projection for December is that we will be in within budget in June. We talked about the $700,000 in savings for the retirees that was earmarked for the medical retention, and the other item of note is the excess cost reimbursement additional excess cost reimbursement that we expect to get this year. Those are the highlights. That's the December projection, and we'll do it all again after tomorrow.
After tomorrow. Any questions on the quarterly financials? Mrs. Lou McCormick and then Mr. Llewellyn.
I'm sorry, I must have missed. I recall them saying that we couldn't have a loss in the first year. Is that right?
You mean at the end of a fiscal year?
Yeah, at the end of a fiscal year. So am I reading this? Does this say that we have a loss?
Are you on, sorry, just for point of clarification, are you on the food service or the quarterly?
Are you on the quarterly or the food service?
Oh, this is the
This is the
I'm sorry, I'm
quarterly.
looking at the wrong one.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Okay. This is the
Draw that.
quarterly. Any questions on the quarterly financial report? No, we were moving on and something had looked over and you went there? I see no comments. Shall we move on to food service? If you do have questions that you want to ask, feel free to send them directly into Mrs. Munsell. The food service financial report, there are documents that were sent out to us. Mr. Llewellyn, you asked for information on this. Do you want to start with any questions or comments?
Thank you. I'm going to refer to the one page here to start with. So our cash on hand when Whitson's came and took over, I guess was July 1st, was $125,000?
That sounds about right.
Okay. And it appears as though if we come down to the line called profit loss before inventory, there's been a loss of $80,000. Is that correct? Okay. And the direct expenses, are those district expenses that appear in our budget book that don't really, they're not part of, explain them. I won't put words in your mouth.
These are expenses that in the contract the district is responsible for, but that are funded out of the food service fund. They're not in, they have nothing to do with the Board of Ed budget.
These are not in the Board of Ed budget.
Correct.
Okay. And the projections for the year for that section, so if I come down to basically the second line up that says total district's expenses, there are no projections for a full year. Am I safe to assume that it's going to be give or take 110, 120,000, basically 2 times the 56?
No, because most of that is repairs and maintenance.
Okay. So what do we think that annual number might be?
I'm sorry?
Do you know what that annual number might be for our budget?
Well, it would be the cost of the secretary and whatever repairs and maintenance we incur.
So if I take the 56 and subtract the 22?
I'm sorry?
If I take the 56, oh, no, it's 39 up there is the repairs. So ballpark, that number's going to come out around, can you give me a ballpark, 80?
If you can't make a projection, you can't make a projection, but I mean...
There's supposed to be a budget, I believe, for the fund. And I don't see a budget. I see what Winston's proposed, but I don't see it coming down and covering the district costs, which are not in our actual budget.
Yeah. This is the first year. Are there numbers that could be put in that blank column?
There are. We could put, I don't know what I could put for repairs and maintenance, but I could put the secretary salary, yes.
Okay, thank you. So if, yeah, and that makes sense with the repairs and maintenance. So if we look at the management fee, and thank you very much for the additional copy of this. I couldn't find mine. It appears as though it says that Whitson's if there is a loss, Whitson's will absorb that loss up into the amount of their management fee, which is $90,000. Is that a fair representation?
Their management and administrative fees are at risk.
Okay, and where are their administrative fees on here? Is that all in the management fee line?
I believe it's separate.
Would that be part of the general support and administration line somewhere or not?
Part of it is, yes.
Part of it is. Do you know what that annualized number is for administration approximately?
Or the specific, if I mind, the specific question you're trying to get at is what is the sum total of their risk, if you will?
Correct.
Is that correct?
And we know the management fee is 90.
Yeah. So perhaps Mrs. Munsell could
I don't remember
get
off
that
the top
number
of my
and
head.
send it out to you?
That'd be great, because here's, as I come down and look at this, our cost of operations, if we were to back out the management fee, and I don't know what allocation is general support administration, so we will get that, but it appears as though we've got an operating loss of approximately $45,000, which would be our revenue less our food purchases, less our payroll, less those itemized general operating expenses. If we continue along a similar trend, we'll be at around -90, which would offset the management fee, which would assume about a 0. But we're not then covering whatever number happens to be our district expenses. So it is feasible, if things continue to track the way they are, that we're going to have an operating loss again in food service. And I mean, that is kind of what that is, and I know we've taken this change and the loss is not as bad as it was in prior years, but I guess the question before, I guess through the chair to Dr. Title is, how does a loss of some number in here, whether it be $60,000, $70,000, get back, I don't know what the number is, so I don't want to say the number. How does that impact our budget just approved?
But the question is, if the loss is greater than what they've guaranteed, what happens to that?
And based on what is here, it's uncertain.
The guaranteed profit is $178,08. The expenses that we're responsible for, the secretary and the repairs and maintenance, it's highly unlikely that they would be more than that. So the 170 is a guarantee. We have to cover from that the secretary salary and benefits and repairs and maintenance. It's highly unlikely that it would be more than the 170.
But I'm sorry. So is the 170 is a guarantee to the extent they make money?
It's a guarantee no matter what happens, if they make money or lose money.
Mr. Llewellyn, while you're looking, this is the last item, and we have committee and liaison and open board comment, so I probably need a motion to get 11:15 or something like that to extend the meeting. So while you're looking at the contract, can I get, Mr. Llewellyn?
Yes,
can
I'm
I take
listening.
that motion to extend
Sure,
the
yeah,
meeting?
please.
Okay, can I have a motion to extend the meeting to 11:15? Mrs. Maxon Cannelli, is there another motion? Mrs. Gerber? Any discussion on extending the meeting to 11:15? Seeing no hands go up, all in favor, please raise your hands. It's okay. It's everybody except opposed is Mr. Convertito and Mr. Fattabine.
Sorry, I was just...
Right? Correct. Opposed is Mr. Convertito and Mr. No, just Mr. Convertito. 7-1. Okay, the meeting is extended to 11:15. Now, Mr. Llewellyn, have you found your page?
Well, I found the page, but it's the language is interesting. I'll have to read it.
Okay, so you'll have
yes.
to read it.
So if we can come back to this sometime, thank you.
Can Mr. Convertito break
No,
into the
please,
conversation?
yeah, no, absolutely.
Please, Mr. Convertito.
On this year-to-date report, we're still missing 2 months' worth of reimbursement from the state. Is that correct?
We're missing reimbursement, yes.
So we've got like a 2-month lag in there, right? If I assume October is for September, and what you have in November,
It doesn't come in as regularly as that, but yes, we are missing reimbursement.
If I can follow up, this is not an accrual form of, so you haven't accrued that, and
No.
so this is a cash form of revenue. So at the end of the year, eventually you will reserve for the last 2 months in some number that it's a professional judgment.
Mhm.
Thank you.
But it all does come down to the guarantee of 178.08 and the expenses.
Yeah, and the 170, I think, is reduced by whatever we spend in maintenance. But the language, if necessary, they'll reduce its management fee and administrative.
Right.
I'll follow up with,
Okay.
I'd like to get a better understanding, just so I know if we have a budget impact or not.
Okay.
And one of the things that I think would be helpful to me in terms of looking at this for agenda items is where you've had a year-long conversation about food service, and is that the essence? Is this contract going to end up costing our budget? Is that what you're pursuing?
My concern is it going to have an impact on our budget
Yeah,
this year? And then what's going to be happening to the cash balance? And is it something we need to worry about for next year?
Okay, so that's what's driving the question. Okay,
That is
thank you.
exactly what it is. Thank you.
Committee and liaison reports. Do we have any committee or liaison reports? Mrs. Gerber.
Yeah, just if people hadn't heard, the Osborne Hill Building Committee went to the Board of Selectmen and received funding to finish out the windows and gym part of the project. I think it was about $340,000, correct? And so now they go to the Board of Finance and then the RTM. And right now I think the gym is supposed to be done by April break. So they may actually have their gym back after April break. So we're keeping our fingers crossed.
Tuesday night is Board of Finance.
Tuesday night's Board of Finance. Osborne Hill will be before them then.
And while I don't know whether there's a particular liaison report, since we're talking about the success of Osborne Hill to get the windows and gym, Jennings was not as successful at the Board of Selectmen. And perhaps if enough Jennings parents, Tom Flynn will kill me for this, show up at the Board of Finance, perhaps the boilers will be able to be replaced. The security did get cut in half, roughly, but that's because the projects will take 2 years to do, and under normal circumstances, they might award the bond for the entire project, but at this point in time, they decided to award just this year's worth of security projects and then take the next group the next year. Any other liaison and committee reports? I don't know whose hand went up first.
Go ahead.
Mr. Patton.
On the security getting split, so we are still committed.
We're on schedule. We're on schedule.
To provide that 160, we're still committed to that.
Yes.
Well, we have to get through the Board of Finance and the RTM before a definitive answer can be given on that.
Understood.
Yeah.
On track.
Right, we're on track for that.
Yes.
Yes.
With the reduced amount, we're still on track. That's the question.
Mr. Llewellyn, you had your hand up.
I was reading that again, and Mr. Fatabine's going to read it as well, just for a second. But this is the food service piece. It does say that at no
We're
point.
on committee and liaison reports.
I
So let me do you have any committee liaison reports? If not, thank you. Any other committee liaison reports? No, I don't have anything. Open board comment. Who wants to start with open board comment? I'll start over with Mrs. Lou McCormick. We'll work our way around. Any open board comment?
I think I've said what I need to say tonight.
Thank you very much. Mr. Patton.
I just want to echo Mr. Dwyer and Dr. Title's comments on thanking the staff for all the hard work that they put into this every year. I know it's not easy, and you get 3 days to answer 4,000 questions, and you do as many as you can in that time. And so we never get them all, but we get a lot. So you guys do great work, and again, thank you for everything you do.
Mrs. Gerber.
Yep, just to piggyback on what Mr. Patton just said, thank you so much to all of the staff. You were very, very helpful in answering lots of questions with a very quick turnaround time, and I do really appreciate all of the time and work and effort that you put into this budget and to addressing all of the board members' concerns. So thank you very much.
I'll go last. So, Mr. Convertito, nothing. Mr. Fattabine, for open board comment, anything you wish to say?
No.
I don't think anybody is going to be able to outdo that report. Mrs. Maxon Kennelly. Nothing. Mr. Llewellyn.
Yes, thank you. Actually, I would like to follow on the concept I had before of, through the chair, I'd like to get a sense of the body as to whether or not at the next regular meeting in February that we should, talk about an analysis for the foundation for future budgets to assist in kind of also then giving guidance to the other bodies. But I think if we have some of the other conversations that came up at this one and at a prior one, during the course of the year, this process will be it'll be a lot smoother. We're seeing stuff, as I said before, 2 weeks before we need to vote on it, and some of it, for example, has been, well thought out, but in the works for quite some time. But had we, seen that back in December, the conversation may or may not have arisen. So if you could get a sense of the bodies, whether or not people want to at least have an initial conversation at the next regular meeting as to the topic.
Well, let me leave out the conversation about whether it's the next regular meeting and say it's been 3 years since this body talked about its budget process and changed its budget process fairly substantially. That I think Mrs. Maxon Kennelly went through pretty well in terms of starting at a certain date. The budget manual is new as a result of that conversation. I've always maintained personally that every meeting we're talking about some budget item because everything we talk about has a budget impact. But Mr. Llewellyn has asked whether this board wants to readdress the budget process and get that scheduled on a meeting at an appropriate time.
Yeah, and if I can clarify, it's not the mechanics, which I think is what the dates are. It is having conversations about the direction of things rather than the mechanics of what day is,
And the last process, we have normally used the October meeting for board members to comment on that, but that doesn't mean we can't readdress the budget process if the board has an interest in doing that.
Can I address that?
So Mr. Llewellyn's asked for consensus. Do board members want to make a comment?
Yeah. We set our board goals in August, right?
Yes.
Okay. I'm certainly open to what Mr. Llewellyn has talked about. What I would suggest as a framework for that is after we set our board goals to have a special meeting, working meeting to discuss how we think the budget is going to be affected by that or any proposals that we want to see in that and what they see coming down the pike for that. So I have absolutely no problem with that.
And I'm obviously not, I appreciate it. And I'm not communicating what I think I'm asking is we need to, and we're not talking about mechanics and board goals. We're talking about a bigger picture. But
So now, I have to remind the board that starting a conversation among the board, an open board comment that has not been listed on the agenda is not something that we like to encourage. So let me find a way to look at consensus, if you will. The last comment that I would make is that when the Ad hoc Communications Committee issued its report, one of its suggestions was that we hold I'll say an open public meeting outside of our regular meeting, not unlike the Board of Finance does, to take comments from the public that might allow for a little bit more dialogue than can actually happen here. And so to follow up on that original suggestion, I'm going to make a suggestion that I call a meeting for Saturday, February 28th at 9:30 for that purpose, and to say that it would be structured somewhere along the lines that the Board of Finance does it when they do their annual meeting, the way they do it during the budget process. And so I'm looking to see if February 28th, that's a Saturday, would make sense for people. That would not be a mandatory you have to be there, but certainly we would like to get the full board there if possible. And this would be an open invitation to the public to be able to have a back and forth dialogue in a way that really is not possible here. And I would suggest that when the Board of Finance does it, they do not expect a full contingent of staff showing up. at such an event, any contingent of staff showing up at that. So for those of you who may travel a distance and are home on Saturdays, we do not expect you to come back. Even if they live here, they don't have to, unless as a citizen you want to wander by. February 28th? Yeah, morning, 9:30, something like that. The Board of Finance normally does it like 9:30 to, generally they cut it off at 12, give or take. You know, this will be the first time we're doing it, and so maybe we won't get that much attendance in the first year, but we'll try it out and see what happens. Do I have any objections to that? I mean, I'm calling a meeting, but what about the date? I'm getting a nod.
I'm conflicted.
I'm getting a nod. Jennifer? A nod?
Ask a question?
Yes, but first let me check the date, make sure it's...
I don't know.
You don't know the date. Mr. Convertito? You can do it? And I can do... Okay, your question.
Is there an agenda?
Would
there be an agenda?
Yes, I am thinking of an agenda that would be fairly broad, that says we can talk about the program, facilities, finances, quote, everything but personnel, so that we can keep it to a general topic that the community could talk about, but not run afoul of having people stand up and talk about personnel. So I've got to find a agenda topic that will accomplish that, that goal. Does that answer your question? I'll say 9:30. I have to find a place, but before I go looking for a place, I want to check the date.
So an open-ended discussion with some restriction on content.
An open-ended discussion on the agenda item that's shown there. Yes. And Mr. Fattabine, you know full well what we're trying to avoid. We're trying to avoid a public session where somebody can stand up and start talking about an individual staff member because they just want to. That's exactly what we're trying to accomplish. That's correct.
That wasn't what I said.
Yeah. So it sounded like it. So that is what we'll do. Okay, then consider that to be a date, and we'll send out some form of notice once I find a location. Anything else? Motion to adjourn from Mr. Convertito, seconded by Mrs. Maxon Cannelli. All in favor of the motion to adjourn, please raise your hand. It is unanimous with 8-0.